Last year, I was dog sitting for my aunt. Her dog's this tiny, sweet little thing, but super skittish, always jumping at the smallest noise. I was staying at her place for the week since I had work anyway, and her house is honestly pretty nice. Not so big that it feels empty when you're alone, but not so small that you're tripping over stuff either. I stuck to the basics: kitchen, bathroom, living room, and the guest bedroom. That was plenty for me and the pup. My last workday that week was a double shift, which I was kinda dreading, but I was also pumped because it meant 2 whole days off afterward. I had big plans to kick back with a dog and introduce him to RuPaul's Drag Race. Gotta keep the vibes high for a double shift. You know, I was working as a barista and cashier at this little coffee shop, and mornings they're always a madhouse. Everyone's desperate for their coffee and breakfast bagels. Nights, though, especially on weekends, are dead. People aren't exactly lining up for our sandwiches at 8 p.m. That day was actually pretty chill compared to the rest of the week. We'd had some wild days, including one where there was a small fire. Yeah, that kind of week. But this shift, smooth sailing. As the morning rush started to die down, I could finally see the handful of tables in the place. I started people watching, just scanning the customers munching on bagels or flipping through newspapers. That's when I noticed this guy at a table with his laptop. He had long, greasy hair and a bit of scruff on his face, and he was staring at me. Like staring. Way too intense. I wondered if he thought I was being rude for watching him, so I decided to duck away and keep busy cleaning and restocking. The line picked up again soon after, so I hopped back on the register. Once that rush cleared, I glanced out at the tables again, and yep, the guy was still there. Still staring. Every now and then, he'd look at his laptop, then back at me. It wasn't just a glance, it felt like he was looking through me. Like he could see every little thing about me. It creeped me out so bad that I bailed to the back of the restaurant to clean, just to get out of his line of sight. After the next rush, I took my break and made sure to sit as far away from that guy as possible. I was on one side of the restaurant, completely out of his view, and it felt like a relief. When I got back from my break, he was gone. My manager pulled me aside and asked if I'd talk to him at all. I told her about the weird eye contact, but said nothing else happened. She got this serious look and told me the guy had been watching some really inappropriate, explicit stuff on his laptop, straight up adult films, right there in a coffee shop. She'd had to ask him to leave. So yeah, that was already weird as hell. This dude was watching that kind of stuff and staring at me like a creep. I really wish that was the end of it. The rest of the day went by without a hitch, but me and a couple of the other girls at work were definitely feeling uneasy. Closing time rolled around, and I actually love that part of the job. I'm one of those weirdos who finds cleaning kind of soothing. We were almost done with our tasks when my manager came up to me again, looking worried. She told me that creepy laptop guy had somehow snuck back into the restaurant at some point and was hiding in a dark corner in the back. She found him and chased him out, threatening to call the cops, and he took off. She mentioned that since he'd been fixating on me earlier, she wanted me to wrap up whatever I needed to do and get out of there ASAP. She even offered to walk me to my car, which I wasn't about to turn down. I grabbed my stuff, clocked out, and we booked it to my car. My aunt's house was only about a 5-minute drive from work, which was a godsend because I was still rattled. As soon as I got inside, I triple-checked every lock on every door, changed into my pajamas, and tried to calm down. But sleep? No way. I was way too wired. So I figured it was time to make good on my plan to chill with the dog and watch RuPaul's Drag Race. The living room had a couch, a couple chairs, a TV, a window, and the front door. The porch light was busted, and the window didn't have curtains, which made me a little nervous. But I wasn't about to watch TV in the creepy basement with the other TV. That one faced a sliding glass door that looked out into pitch black woods. Hard pass. I was fiddling with the TV, trying to get it set up, when the dog started growling. I didn't think much of it at first. He's skittish, so he's always barking or growling at nothing. I muttered a quick shoo while messing with the remote, but he didn't stop. If anything, he got louder. Finally, I put the remote down, turned to see what was up, and I froze. The dog was staring at the window, barking his little head off, and there, in the dark, was the outline of a man standing outside. Same build as the guy at the coffee shop. My heart stopped. I screamed loud, and thank God that was enough to make him bolt. I just stood there paralyzed for what felt like forever. The dog finally calmed down, but I was still shaking. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and did the only thing that made sense. I called my mom. She's not big on calling the cops, never has been. So she told me to skip that and instead came over to spend the night with me. I also called my aunt, who was totally cool with me having a friend stay over every night for the rest of my time there. I clutched that knife like my life depended on it whenever I slept or showered after that. Nothing else happened, and I never saw that guy again. Not at work, not anywhere. Part of me wishes I knew who he was, what he wanted, or where he went. But honestly, I'm just glad my scream and that tiny skittish dog were enough to scare him off. It felt like he was just waiting for the right moment, and I hate to think what might have happened if I hadn't turned around when I did. This happened about 5 years ago, not long after my fiancé and I had been living in our house for a little over a year. I'm a big guy, 6 feet tall, 225 pounds, naturally muscular, and I've been told I can come off as pretty intimidating. My fiancé, on the other hand, is a tiny little thing, 5'2", about 130 pounds. Our place is a bi-level home, so when you walk through the front door, you've got 2 short staircases, one going up to the living room and one going down to the basement. The only way to get to our backyard is through the sliding glass door in the upstairs living room, which leads to a deck with stairs going down. Back then, I was in a rough spot. I was partying way too much, more than I should have, honestly. I was between jobs, and with the holidays winding down, I wasn't exactly in a rush to find something new. Most nights, I'd be out drinking or whatever, and I'd end up crashing at a friend's place. That meant my fiancé was home alone a lot with our 3 Great Danes. Looking back, I'm not proud of it, but I had a serious problem with alcohol and substances, and it was starting to take over my life. Fast forward a couple of months, and I just landed a new job, one with random drug and alcohol tests, which, in hindsight, was a godsend. I'd been sober for all of 2 days, and I was starting to patch things up with my fiancé. One night, she told me how glad she was that I was sleeping at home again. I didn't think much of it at the time, just kissed her on the head and told her I was happy to be home too, and that I loved her. Later that night, we were downstairs watching TV, just chilling, when I thought I heard something move in the backyard. The dogs heard it too. Their ears perked up, but they didn't go nuts, so I brushed it off. Probably just the wind or something, right? But then a moment later, I heard it again. My fiancé quickly grabbed the remote and muted the TV, giving me this nervous look. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaky, like she was really unsettled. I tried to play it cool, saying it was probably just some of the neighborhood cats messing around in the bushes. We got a bunch of stray cats around, so it wasn't a stretch. But she shook her head dead serious and said it wasn't that. Before I could even ask why she was so sure, we heard the sliding glass door upstairs fly open. All 3 of our Great Danes shot up, barking auditioning for this, and so did I. They let out the most ferocious barks I've ever heard, tearing up the stairs with me, right behind them. As I was rounding the first set of stairs and the dogs were hitting the top of the second, I saw the sliding glass door slam shut and caught a glimpse of a man's silhouette sprinting away. I flung the door open, and the dogs nearly knocked me over as they barreled out to chase this guy. I grabbed my flashlight, one of those big, heavy mag lights, like the kind cops carry, and ran out into the yard. I hit the deck stairs just as the dogs were losing it at the back fence. I sprinted over, jumped the fence, and got there just in time to see the guy reaching the opposite fence trying to climb over. He was dressed head to toe in black, thick black hoodie with the hood pulled tight to hide his face, black cargo pants, the whole deal. I didn't even think about my own safety. I just charged at him. I barely missed grabbing him as he scrambled over the fence. I followed, vaulting over it, and came around the front of my neighbor's house just in time to see him jump into an old, beat-up pickup truck and peel out. I stood there for a second, watching as he tore out of the neighborhood and disappeared into the night. I ran back home as fast as I could to check on my fiancée. She was sitting in the upstairs living room, surrounded by all 3 Great Danes, clutching the biggest kitchen knife we owned. She was shaken up, no question, but she's a tough woman. She told me she was ready to back me up if I'd gotten into trouble out there. We called the cops, gave our statements, and triple-checked every door and window in the house to make sure everything was locked tight. Neither of us was anywhere near tired after that adrenaline rush, so we decided to throw on another movie to wind down. During the movie, I asked her what made her so sure the noise wasn't just cats in the yard. What she told me hit me like a ton of bricks and made me realize I needed to turn my whole life around. She said that for about a month, she'd been hearing strange noises around the house late at night, footsteps outside, sometimes even what sounded like whispering. When I asked why she never told me, she just shook her head and said she didn't know. Hearing that, it clicked. Whoever this guy was, he knew I was hardly ever home at night. He knew my fiancée was alone most of the time. Thank God he somehow didn't account for our 3 Great Danes, and for whatever reason, that night he didn't check to make sure she was alone. Since that day, I've been 100% sober, no alcohol, no nothing. As of March 1st, it's been 5 years clean. I haven't left my fiancée alone overnight since then. Our relationship is stronger than ever, and our 3 Great Danes? They're the best dogs anyone could ask for. That night changed my life completely, and honestly, all for the better. I moved into my little apartment in February last year, and let me tell you, it was perfect for me. I'm pretty antisocial, so living alone was like a dream come true. My landlord, Olivia, was this sweet older lady who'd cook way too much food and drop off leftovers for me. Always a treat, especially since nobody in my family cooks like that. I told her straight up about my reclusive tendencies, but she didn't care one bit. Said I reminded her of her daughter. Every few weeks, she'd knock on my door, let me know she left something outside, and I'd eat like a queen. The next morning, I'd wash her containers, leave them outside my door, and within an hour, she'd grab them. My other neighbors seemed fine, but I never talked to them or anything. Didn't need to. I worked from home, so whenever I had to go out, I'd rush back to my safe little cave and avoid any awkward small talk. Honestly, I loved it. It was my own quiet world where I could just breathe. But by April, things started feeling off. Stuff in my apartment would go missing or get moved around. A shoe here, a mug there, little things that made me question myself. I chalked it up to anxiety, maybe a side effect of the new meds I was on. They made me super drowsy too, so I was taking naps during the day, which wasn't like me. I figured it was just the stress of moving and the meds messing with my head, so I brushed it off. One day, though, Olivia dropped off this amazing Greek tossed salad with dressing for lunch. I was curled up on the couch, eating it while watching Portlandia on Netflix. My kind of afternoon. I ended up dozing off right in the middle of an episode and woke up around 5 p.m., which was normal for me lately. What wasn't normal was my bed. I always sleep on the right side, always. But the left side was messed up, like someone had been lying there. My first thought was maybe I'd rolled around a lot in my sleep, but deep down, I knew that wasn't it. It creeped me out. I got up, gripped my phone with 911 already typed in, and searched every inch of my apartment. Nothing else was out of place. Everything looked exactly like it should. So I let it go, tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. For the next few weeks, things were mostly normal, except for the occasional weirdness, a misplaced shoe, the shower curtain pulled back when I swore I'd left it closed. I thought about telling someone, maybe my parents or Olivia, but I'm stubborn. Unless it's life or death, I'm not reaching out. I wasn't scared, just uneasy. I wasn't about to let some dumb anxiety ruin my perfect, lonely little world. Then May hit, and things got worse. My underwear, my toothbrush, even some of my food started going missing or showing up in weird places. Every time I woke up from a nap, there was this strange odor in the air. Not bad, just off. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I finally broke down and called my mom, practically begging her to let me stay at their place for a few days. When I got there, I spilled everything. Saying it out loud made it all feel so much more real and way creepier than I'd let myself admit. That weekend, my dad went to check on my apartment, and what he found was straight up terrifying. The walls were covered in writing, scrawled messages saying, "Come back, baby, please." My dad freaked out, bolted outside, and called the police. Turns out, there was no one living in my apartment, but someone definitely had access besides me. The investigation uncovered that it was Henry, Olivia's son. They showed me his confession on tape, and I felt sick. He admitted to using his mom's spare key to get into my apartment every single day and night for months. He claimed we were in love, that I'd given him permission to be there. He'd been drugging the food Olivia left for me, which explained why I was so drowsy all the time. He'd come in while I was asleep, watch me, touch my hair, kiss my shoulder. They tested the leftovers in my fridge, and all checked out drugged. He'd been collecting stuff from my apartment too. Hair from my drain, clothes, even trash. This guy I didn't even know existed had practically been living in my space for 4 months. I was horrified, disgusted, just completely shaken. I never even met him, never knew his name or what he looked like. I'd been totally clueless that he was there, invading my life while I was just trying to enjoy my quiet little world. Back when we were all 14, my tight-knit group of friends, basically family, had this wild, terrifying experience that stuck with us ever since. It was Jen's birthday, and we were all hanging out at her house, stuffing our faces with pizza, swapping gifts, and battling it out on video games. After a while, we got antsy, craving something more exciting before the night was over. We collectively decided to head to this massive forested park near her place, about a 15-minute drive away. It's a weird spot, a huge forest stretching 4 or 5 miles with a small beach tucked right beside it, which always felt like a strange combo. Jen's mom dropped us off, told us to call or text when we were ready to head back, and off she went. We all lived in a pretty safe neighborhood, barely any crime, so we weren't too worried. Cell service was spotty out there, but we figured we'd be fine. When we got to the park, we messed around for a bit, wandering the open, less wooded paths, just joking and having fun. I glanced at my watch after what felt like an hour since Jen's mom left. It was around 6:30 p.m. Where we live, the sun sets crazy fast in autumn and winter, and this was October. The sky was already turning, and we could feel the darkness creeping in. We decided to stick around for just a few more minutes, soaking in the vibe. Then, out of nowhere, Damien, one of the guys in our group, pipes up. "Yo, I gotta take a leak. Don't follow me into the woods unless you want your jackets turned into toilet paper." He shot us a goofy grin and half jogged off into the trees. We waited, and waited, and waited some more. It was getting dark fast. Lucy was the first to lose it, her voice shaky as she said what we were all starting to think. Something wasn't right. We tried calling Damien a bunch of times, but no answer. His phone was either dead or out of service. Classic horror movie stuff, right? After some back and forth, we made the dumbest decision ever. We go into the woods to find him. Against every ounce of better judgment, we stepped into the forest. It was like walking into a wall of darkness. Our eyes couldn't make out much, even after adjusting to the dim light. We started calling his name, shouting it loud enough to echo through the trees. Big mistake number 1. At first, we weren't too freaked out. We figured Damien was just messing with us, pulling some prank. But after about 10 minutes of wandering and yelling, it hit us. This wasn't a joke. We were lost, completely, utterly lost in this endless sea of trees. Stacy started crying, her sobs breaking through the group's shaky confidence, and that's when it really sank in how serious this was getting. We kept pushing forward, trying to find a way out, but I was freaking out hard by then. Every step felt heavier, and then out of nowhere, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I got that gut-twisting feeling, like someone or something was watching me. I don't care if you believe in that sixth sense stuff or not, but let me tell you, it's real. It felt like a spider creeping up my neck, slow and deliberate, dodging every time I tried to shake it off. I started scanning the bushes and trees, my heart pounding, trying to pinpoint where this creepy vibe was coming from. That's when I saw him, a man half hidden in the woods, trying to blend into the shadows. Holy crap, a man. He flashed this eerie smile and put a finger to his lips, motioning for me to be quiet. Worse, he had one hand tucked behind his back, which screamed bad news. My internal get the hell out of here alarm was blaring. I played it cool, not letting on that I'd seen him, and kept walking with my friends, putting some distance between us and that guy. Then I whispered to the group, freaking out quietly. Jen just stared at me, her face blank with shock. Before we could process it, we heard it. Rapid footsteps crunching through the leaves, coming our way. Lucy let out a scream that could have woken the dead, and we bolted. We ran like our lives depended on it, because they probably did. I'm a national-level cross-country runner, and let me tell you, I've never run like that before or since. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, and I swear I could taste blood in my mouth. We sprinted through the trees, branches scratching our faces, tearing at our clothes. The adrenaline was unreal. You don't know what you're capable of until you're running for your life. We didn't stop until we burst out onto the beach, halfway to the water, gasping and shaking. That's when Damien finally stumbled out of nowhere, puking into the water like he just escaped hell itself. We all froze, staring at him. His eyes had this wild look, pure, raw joy, like he just cheated death. Through his heaving breaths, he managed to tell us what happened. His story was chillingly similar to mine. He'd seen the same guy, got spooked and ran, but couldn't find his way back to warn us. We were just glad to be alive. Our faces were bleeding from the branches, our clothes torn, but we didn't care. I called Jen's mom, and when she picked us up, we spilled everything. Her face went pale as a ghost, and she grabbed her phone to call the police right then and there. Bless her heart, she even stopped to get us each a happy meal on the way home, probably to calm us down. A few days later, she told us the cops searched the forest but found nothing except a smelly, ripped shirt. That night has never left us. Even now, after we've all graduated, we still hang out and talk about it sometimes. We wonder who that man was, what would have happened if I hadn't spotted him, and most of all, what the heck he was hiding behind his back. Back in the day, after high school and a stint in the Marines, I found myself working private security, mostly guarding construction sites at night. One of our gigs was this old sanitarium, a creepy place that had been shut down since the late 60s. The building was still standing, but it was a wreck, and the company that bought the land was planning to tear it down to build an apartment complex. My partner for the job was Fred, a guy pushing 70 who'd been a cop in Chicago and a Marine before that. We got along great, always swapping more stories and shooting the breeze to pass the time. The sanitarium was a magnet for trouble. Homeless folks and drug users were always creeping around, so we spent a lot of nights chasing people off the property. This one night, Fred and I were just chatting, probably trading stories about our Marine days, when he suddenly stopped me mid-sentence. "Hold up," he said, his eyes narrowing. Someone just hopped the fence. We grabbed our gear and headed inside. Now, let me paint the picture. Fred was unarmed, and all I had was my sidearm, plus some pepper spray, a stun gun, and a baton. That's it. The place was dark, musty, and falling apart. Think broken windows, rusted doors, the works. We heard glass shattering somewhere deep inside, like someone had busted into one of the old administrative offices. We had keys, but the locks were ancient, so it took us a few minutes of jiggling to get the door open. Our protocol was to call dispatch during a foot chase, so Fred radioed it in while I led the way, sweeping the rooms with my flashlight and gun drawn. I was shouting for whoever it was to come out, trying to sound tough, but my heart was pounding. We'd seen this guy dressed all in black, ignoring our commands to stop, which was already bad news. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this laugh, an evil, bone-chilling cackle that sent a jolt of dread straight through me. I glanced at Fred, and the guy's face was white as a sheet. This was a Vietnam vet and a former cop, mind you, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. I kept calling out, trying to reason with whoever was in there, even lying that the company had already called police, which, to be fair, they probably had by then. But then the laughing came again, this time from behind us, and it wasn't just one voice. It sounded like a whole group of people, cackling like hyenas. Fred, I swear, was so terrified he actually pissed himself. I'm not judging. My own heart was in my throat. Then we heard footsteps, fast and heavy, and the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. That was it. I grabbed Fred, and we bolted for the exit, the maniacal laughter chasing us through the halls. We didn't stop running until we were outside, gasping for air. Dispatch must have lost contact with us, because the cops showed up not long after, probably thinking we were in serious trouble. They went in and found 3 guys hiding out in there. All 3 were armed, One had a gun, another had a homemade shiv, and the third was carrying a lead pipe. If we hadn't run when we did, who knows what would have gone down. That night still gives me chills when I think about it. This story goes back to October 1977, when my mom was just 16. She and her friend Lisa, both desperate to escape my mom's abusive home life, decided to run away from Massachusetts and hitchhike all the way to California. Not the smartest plan, I know, but considering the hell my mom was living through at home, she figured it couldn't be much worse. They had a surprisingly smooth trip across the country, meeting kind strangers, truck drivers, travelers, you name it, who helped them along the way. Things didn't get scary until they hit California. When they got there, my mom and Lisa met these two guys who seemed super nice at first. They let the girls crash at their place for a couple of days, and it was all partying and good vibes. Nothing sketchy had happened yet. The guys told them they'd take them to Hollywood Hills and Sunset Boulevard to check out the sights, like where the movie stars hung out. My mom, who wasn't from the area and had no clue about the rougher parts of town, was thrilled at the idea. She'd always dreamed of seeing where the celebrities lived. So these guys took my mom and Lisa to some divey restaurant bar. They got the girls completely wasted, my mom's first time drinking like that, and introduced them to some hard drugs, which was also a first for her. By this point, both girls were underage, totally out of it, drunk and high. The group split up, and Lisa went off with one of the guys, leaving my mom alone with the other. He seemed chill enough, but then he suggested something weird. He told her to stand on the sidewalk on Sunset Boulevard in the middle of the night, and if a car pulled up, to get in and tell the driver to head across the street to a dark parking lot. It wasn't until a car actually pulled up and my mom got in that it hit her what was happening. This guy was trying to pimp her out. These dudes had been nothing but kind for 2 days, so it blindsided her. Sadly, abuse wasn't a new concept for her, given her messed up home life, but this was next level terrifying. The driver didn't turn into the parking lot like she was told to direct him. Instead, he kept going, speeding up. My mom, still fuzzy from the drinks and drugs, tried to tell him he'd gone the wrong way. That's when he snapped, locked the doors, hit her, and tried to hold her down, snarling that she wasn't going anywhere. In that moment, my mom knew she had to get out of that car or she was done for. With her heart pounding, she managed to unlock the door in one quick move, then tucked and rolled out onto the street. The car screeched to a halt, and she bolted, spotting some bushes in front of a house and diving behind them to hide. Peeking through the leaves, she saw the guy creeping along in his car, searching for her. Her blood ran cold when she noticed he was holding a gun. As soon as his car passed by, she sprinted to the backyard, only to realize it was fenced in with no way out. She had to crawl back to the bushes, praying he wouldn't spot her. The guy turned his car around and came back, driving slowly, still hunting for her. My mom stayed low, barely breathing, until he passed again. The second she thought he was far enough away, she crawled out ready to run, but then she saw his brake lights flash. He'd seen her. Panic took over, and she ran as fast as she could around a corner, hearing his car closing in. She ducked behind parked cars along the road, hiding as he kept circling. When he passed again, she made a break for it, sprinting across the street, through the parking lot where she was originally supposed to go, and back to her friend. By some miracle, my mom and Lisa ditched those creeps and found a safer place to stay. Not long after, my mom called home and eventually made it back safely. It wasn't until years later, when she saw a news story about a woman's murder, that she recognized the man who'd picked her up that night. It was the Hillside Strangler, a serial killer. When I was sharing this story with her recently, I accidentally showed her a picture of him while looking up details online. She jumped so hard she nearly dropped my phone. It shook her up bad, seeing his face again after all those years. That night in California still haunts her. This happened back on February 24th, around 3:55 p.m., when I was 17, walking to pick up my little brother, who was 11, from his primary school. It's the same boring mile-long trek I did every weekday in South Yorkshire. I was about halfway there, earphones in, blasting Nirvana so loud I could barely hear myself think. Across the road, maybe 10 meters ahead, I noticed two young adults getting all excited, snapping a photo of some woman walking toward them. I couldn't hear what they were yelling about because of my music, so I just kept walking, minding my own business. Then, as this woman got parallel with me on the opposite side of the road, her head snapped to the right, like horror movie style snapped, and locked eyes with me. I was on the left side of the street, she was on the right, but the way she stared gave me instant chills. She started stumbling across the road, completely ignoring a car that had to slam on its brakes to avoid hitting her. She moved like she was drunk out of her mind or high on something serious, all wobbly and uncoordinated. By the time she reached me, I was frozen in place, totally freaked out. She stopped less than a foot from my face, like personal space wasn't a thing to her. Her hands were thrashing around wildly, and her eyes, man, they were unhinged, like she was consumed by rage or something. Her hair was greasy, faded brown, a bit past her shoulders, all matted but kinda curly. She was wearing this dirty olive gray bomber jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. She started mumbling some gibberish, swaying slightly, her face inching closer to mine, probably only 20 centimeters away at one point. Those wild eyes just stared right through me as she rambled incoherently. I snapped out of it, sidestepped her, and jogged off for about 100 meters. When I looked back, she was gone. Completely vanished. This was a straight road, no side streets for hundreds of meters, so unless she had superhuman speed, there's no way she could have just disappeared like that. I was creeped out but kept going to pick up my brother. Honestly, I wasn't that shocked. This part of South Yorkshire is rough. The kind of place where you see trainers dangling from phone lines and drug users aren't exactly rare. When I got to the school, I grabbed my brother and told him to stay sharp on the walk back, just in case this woman showed up again and had something dangerous like a knife. I gave him clear instructions. If I said run, he was to bolt to the nearest shop where the staff knew us and stay there until I came for him. We walked back the same way, right past the spot where I'd seen her, and I was on edge the whole time, scanning for any sign of her. As we got closer to the shops near our house, I saw a police car and an ambulance pulling up. I half joked to my brother that it was probably that crazy woman from earlier. Sure enough, when we reached the footpath by the police car, there she was, being cuffed and led into the back of the cop car. A group of local shop owners was standing nearby, looking shaken, talking among themselves. I figured they were just being nosy as usual and didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, I was just glad she was gone, and I tried to put it out of my mind. That is, until recently. I was eating dinner with my family in our living room when my 14-year-old sister casually mentioned a Snapchat post she'd seen about some dangerous woman in our area who shouldn't be approached. I brushed it off at first. My sister's a typical teenager who believes every rumor her friends spread. But then she kept talking, and my heart just stopped. She hadn't seen me since the day before because she was at a friend's sleepover, so I hadn't told her about my encounter. She started describing this woman who'd been arrested for vandalizing property, breaking into homes, mugging people on the street, and threatening shop staff while acting completely unhinged, shouting nonsense at them. Then she gave the description: greasy, shoulder-length brown hair, slightly curly, wearing a dirty olive gray bomber jacket. My stomach churned, and I nearly choked on my food. It was her. My sister showed me a photo from the Snapchat post, and yep, it was the same woman. What made it even creepier? Those two guys I'd seen taking her picture, turns out they'd snapped the photo that was circulating on social media, and I was just out of the frame. The shopkeepers I saw, they were the ones she'd threatened, and they'd called the police. Apparently, this woman had escaped from a psychiatric ward and had been terrorizing the neighborhood. The police said she was totally unpredictable and dangerous. I feel so lucky I got away without a scratch. It's wild to think how close I came to something really bad happening. That moment still sticks with me, and I'm a lot more cautious walking through that part of town now. When I was about 11, I shared a room with my older brother, who was around 15. We lived in a suburban neighborhood in New York, not the fanciest place, but not exactly a crime hotspot either. Our room had two windows, one overlooking the backyard and another that opened right onto the front porch. That porch window was my brother's go-to for sneaking out to meet his friends. You could just step out onto the porch, and anyone out there could easily get to the window. I never really thought much about it back then. It just didn't cross my mind that it could be creepy. This happened during the summer when we didn't have school and could stay up late. Back then, we didn't have smartphones or laptops to keep us busy, so on nights when we weren't sleepy, my brother and I would just talk or make up dumb games to pass the time. One night, around 2 a.m., we were playing this silly game we came up with. It was like a soccer penalty shootout, but with words. We'd both count down 3, 2, 1 and say left, center, or right at the same time. If my brother, the goalkeeper, picked the same direction as me, the shooter, he'd get a point. If I picked a different direction, I'd score. I was absolutely kicking his butt, and we were having a blast, laughing and trash talking. We were deep into it, probably on our 10th round or something, when we did our countdown, 3, 2, 1. My brother said left, I said center, but then out of nowhere, a voice from outside the porch window said left. We both froze. My heart just stopped. The shade was down, but my mom had left the porch light on, so a dim glow was seeping in around the edges of the shade, barely lighting up our room. That voice, it was a woman's, not too old, not super young, just normal. But the fact that it came from right outside our window at 2 a.m., that was anything but normal. We sat there, dead silent, for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 or 40 seconds. Then we heard a giggle, playful, almost cheerful, and a soft knock on the window. Let's go another round, come on boys, the voice said, all light and teasing, like she was just joining in on our game. I wanted to believe it sounded creepy or menacing, but it didn't. It was just so damn normal, which made it even scarier. I was petrified, my bed right up against that window. All I'd have to do was lift the shade, and I'd be face to face with whoever this was. That thought alone made my whole body go stiff, like I couldn't move if I tried. My brother, trying to stay calm, started slowly inching off his bed toward the door, moving as quietly as he could. I just lay there, barely breathing, my eyes glued to the window. Then we heard it, the slow, deliberate sound of nails dragging down the glass from top to bottom. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I felt like I was going to lose it. My brother finally made it to the door, looking back at me and putting a finger to his lips, signaling me to stay quiet. As soon as the nail scratching stopped, we heard light footsteps walking away from the porch, fading into the night. I stayed frozen in bed, not daring to move for what felt like an eternity. My brother stood in the doorway, waiting. Then we saw my mom hurry past our room toward the front door. The porch light flipped off, plunging our room into total darkness. A minute later, we heard my mom calling for my dad, who was down in the basement. His groggy, annoyed footsteps trudged up the stairs, and they started talking in hushed voices. Eventually, they came into our room, and we spilled everything. How we were playing our game, the voice saying left, the giggle, the knock, the nails on the window, all of it. My mom told us she'd caught a glimpse of some woman walking out of our driveway, half hidden behind the tall bushes. Thank God we had a long driveway, because otherwise she might have thought we were making it all up. Since nothing really happened, no break-in, no harm done, my parents didn't call the police. They just thought it was super weird and stayed up the rest of the night to make sure she didn't come back. I was terrified of that window for weeks after. Even now, at 17, I've got the room to myself since my brother's off at college, but my bed's still right by that window because I'm too lazy to rearrange the furniture. That shade? It hasn't been opened since that night, and I don't think it ever will be. About 6 years ago, my buddy Tommy and I decided to hit up a casino on a G-Way reserve about a 40-minute drive from where we were staying. The plan was to have a fun night out, and the drive there was no big deal, just a long stretch of dark, heavily forested highway with no streetlights. We got to the casino, played some poker, tried our luck at a few table games, and even grabbed dinner with our winnings. It was a pretty solid night for both of us, and we were feeling good. But we ended up leaving the casino around 1 a.m., a bit later than I'd have liked, especially since that highway gets pitch black at night. We've been driving for about 20 minutes, not passing a single car, when I spotted 2 green orbs glowing just off the side of the road, right before a hill. I realized it was a deer's eyes reflecting my headlights, so I slammed on the brakes and waited. Sure enough, a few deer crossed the road, and I let out a breath, thinking that was the worst of it. I started driving again, but we were going slow, crawling up the hill from a dead stop. As we crested the top, Tommy let out a scream. Holy crap! Right in front of us was a young woman walking straight down the middle of our lane, heading right toward us. She was maybe 30 feet away, and I slammed on the brakes again, stopping about 10 feet from her. Thank God we were going slow because of the deer, or it could have been bad. But what really got me wasn't that I almost hit her. It was how she looked. This woman had long pitch black hair and was wearing a white nightgown, like something straight out of a horror flick. No shoes, just barefoot on the asphalt, with this blank, empty expression on her face. It was eerie as hell, like she'd walked right out of a nightmare. I sat there, gripping the wheel, waiting to see if she'd come up to the window, maybe ask for help or something. But she didn't stop. She just kept walking toward us slow and steady until she reached the front of my car. Then she veered around to the driver's side, her hand dragging across the side of my car as she passed. The sound of her fingers scraping the metal sent shivers down my spine. She didn't even glance at us, just kept walking with that same blank look, like we weren't even there. Tommy and I were both freaking out. I turned to him and asked, "What the hell do we do?" He was like, "Man, let's just get out of here." And honestly, that sounded like the smart move, but something didn't sit right with me. She was out here alone, in the middle of nowhere, in a freaking nightgown. What if she was in trouble? I couldn't just drive off without at least checking. So against Tommy's protests, I decided to see if she was okay. He was practically begging me to leave, saying, "Dude, this is bad news, let's go." But I put on a brave face and told him I'd be right back. I flipped on my hazard lights and stepped out of the car, leaving my door open to let some light spill out. The interior lights and blinkers didn't do much, but they gave me just enough to see her outline as she walked down the hill. I could only catch glimpses of her every other second as the hazard lights flashed. I half yelled, "Hey, are you all right?" She stopped walking but didn't turn around, just stood there, facing away from me. No response. I heard Tommy's door creak open as he got out to join me, probably worried I was about to do something stupid. Then, out of nowhere, she let out this blood-curdling shriek. It wasn't human. It was like something primal, tearing through the silence of the night. Tommy and I didn't even think. We sprinted back to the car, jumped in, and I floored it. My heart was pounding, and Tommy was giving me crap the whole way back, like, "I told you, man. Why do you have to play hero?" I didn't have a good answer. I just knew I couldn't shake the image of her standing there, shrieking into the darkness. We made it back to the cabin, shaken but safe. I haven't seen or heard anything like that on that highway since, and I'm damn grateful for it. That night still haunts me. The way she looked, the way she moved, that scream. It's hands down the creepiest thing I've ever been through. Back in February 2010, when I was just 7 years old, my mom used to let me walk home from school since our apartment was only a short distance away. It was never a big deal, same route every day, no problems. But one day, as I was walking home, a black car pulled up next to me. I can't for the life of me remember what kind it was, but the driver's window rolled down, and there was this woman with bright red hair, looking maybe 45 or so. She smiled and introduced herself as Erica, claiming she was my dad's sister. Now, my dad had left before I was born, and we didn't have any contact with his family. Just a few days earlier, I'd been peppering my mom with questions about him, including whether he had any siblings. She told me he only had brothers, so I knew right off the bat this lady was lying. But instead of just walking away or calling her out, I was a dumb kid and told her my name. She started asking me all these questions, like where I went to school and how my brother was doing. It creeped me out big time. I remembered what I'd been taught about strangers, so I told her I wasn't supposed to talk to people I didn't know and started walking faster. She didn't back off. The car kept rolling slowly alongside me, and she kept saying stuff like, "I don't mean any harm." I got scared and broke into a run. She followed, her car creeping along as I sprinted toward my apartment complex. My brother had always told me if someone was following me, I should run to our neighbor's place and pretend it was our house. So that's what I did. I bolted to their door, acting like it was mine. When I glanced back, I saw her car pulling away. I was shaking, but I didn't tell my mom because I was worried she'd stop letting me walk home alone. The very next day, it happened again. Same black car, same woman. This time, she leaned out the window and offered me a ride. I told her no to leave me alone and took off running to the neighbor's house again. She followed me, just like before, but drove off when I got to the door. I still didn't tell my mom. I was too scared of losing my freedom. Then came Saturday. I was at the basketball court in our complex, playing with my brother, when I saw that black car drive by. I freaked out, grabbed my brother, and told him I felt sick, so we'd go inside. He didn't know what was going on, but he went along with it. On Sunday after church, we were pulling into the complex in my mom's car when I spotted her again. This time she wasn't in her car, she was just standing there outside. I noticed she had a big belly and skinny legs, which stuck in my head because it looked odd. I was terrified, so I ran inside as soon as we parked and hid by the living room window, watching her while my mom and brother went to make lunch. I saw her walk over to the neighbor's house, the same one I'd been running to. A few moments later, she left, and then our neighbor came over to our place. She told my mom that a lady had come by, claiming to be my teacher and saying she needed to talk to me about something. That's when I lost it. I started bawling and told my mom everything. The car, the red-haired woman, her saying she was my dad's sister, the questions, the following, all of it. My mom started crying too, scared out of her mind about what could have happened. She called the police right away, and both me and our neighbor gave him a full report. After that, my mom made me wait for my brother, who was 13, to get out of school so we could walk home together. A few weeks later, I saw that black car again in the complex. I pointed it out to my brother, who told my mom immediately. She reported it, but things seemed to die down by April, and we never heard anything from the police about whether they caught her or not. I pretty much forgot about it as the years went by. That is, until yesterday. I was at Albertsons with my best friend when I felt a tap on my shoulder. My stomach dropped. It was her. Same red hair, same face, introducing herself as Erica again, like no time had passed. I was in shock, my mouth just hanging open. I tried to play it cool, acting polite, but when she offered to give me a ride home, the panic hit hard. I grabbed my friend and got the hell out of there, walking away as fast as I could without looking back. I'm honestly freaked out that she remembered me after all these years and still tried to get me to go with her. I told my mom everything, and we reported it to the police again. Now we're just stuck, not sure what to do next, knowing she's still out there. This happened years ago when I was about 12 or 13, growing up in a small village about an hour and a half from a big city in the US. My best friend Sarah and I loved spending our summer days wandering around the woodsy neighborhoods, doing typical kids stuff, exploring, messing around, just having fun. I had a little sister, Sammy, who was around 7 or 8, and Sarah had a little sister, Alex, about the same age. Sometimes our parents would make us let the younger ones tag along, especially if they knew we were heading out. One of our favorite things to do was walk to our neighbor's house, the Smiths, who had this awesome trampoline in their yard. Their place was in our neighborhood, but the houses around there were pretty spread out, with thick forests in between. The walk to their house took about 20 or 30 minutes, and it was always longer on the way back because it was uphill. One day, Sarah and I decided to let Sammy and Alex come with us to the Smiths to jump on the trampoline. They weren't usually allowed to go far without an adult, but since we were all together, it seemed fine. We spent an hour or two bouncing around, having a blast until we got thirsty, or maybe hungry. I can't remember exactly. Either way, we decided to head back to Sarah and Alex's house for some snacks. The last stretch before their place was the longest part of the walk. Just this isolated road with a creek running alongside it and no houses around, just dense forest on both sides. We were almost through the wooded part, close enough to see their house up ahead, when we noticed a woman walking toward us. She had short black hair, was wearing sunglasses, and was pushing a baby stroller. I didn't recognize her, which was a little odd since I knew pretty much everyone in our neighborhood. But it wasn't super weird. Lots of people from nearby areas walked through because of the woods, so I didn't think much of it at first. She passed by us like it was no big deal, but right after, she called out, "Hey kids, I'm a little lost. What road is this?" None of us were too alarmed. Our neighborhood's roads twist and turn, so it's easy to get turned around, and she seemed harmless, just a lady with a baby. We told her the name of the road, and she said she was really lost and needed to get home to take care of her baby. Then she asked if we could walk her to her house because she didn't think she'd find it even with directions. Sarah, being the friendly type, agreed to help, but I got this bad feeling in my gut. My parents had drilled it into me never to go off with strangers, even if they seemed nice, and something about this just felt off. I spoke up and said we couldn't help because Sarah's dad was expecting us home soon. Sarah shot me a weird look, but I think she caught on because she quickly nodded and said, "Oh yeah, we can't, sorry." I was getting more freaked out by the second and wanted to get the younger girls out of there. Sammy and Alex were trailing behind us, so I stepped forward to nudge them ahead, which put me closer to the lady in her stroller. As I got near, I glanced into the stroller, and my heart just sank. There was no baby. It was a freaking doll, wrapped up in blankets but clearly plastic. I could see its shiny fake face peeking out. I didn't know what to do, but every alarm in my head was screaming. I yelled, "Run," and made sure Sammy and Alex were in front of me as we bolted toward Sarah's house. We sprinted like our lives depended on it, not looking back. Sarah's dad was working in the garage when we got there, out of breath and crying. I blurted out that a lady with a fake baby in a stroller tried to get us to go with her. He didn't hesitate, grabbed a golf club from his caddy, and told us to get inside the house right away. We ran in, hearts pounding, and locked the door behind us. A few minutes later, Sarah's dad came back. He said he'd started walking toward the woman, but when she spotted him, she was already on the phone with someone. Out of nowhere, a white van screeched up, and she threw the stroller inside and sped off. It all happened so fast, it was like something out of a movie. We were all shaken up, and I'm pretty sure that lady's intentions weren't good, whatever they were. That experience scared the absolute crap out of us. After that, we didn't wander around the neighborhood nearly as much, and when we did, we were always looking over our shoulders, half expecting to see that woman or her creepy doll again. The abandoned car sat there, a silent sentinel in the growing darkness. Its presence was odd enough, but when I saw the flicker of flashlights dancing around it in the dead of night, I knew I'd stumbled into something I wasn't meant to see. As I crept closer, whispered voices carried on the night air, and a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with a cool forest breeze. My name's Mark, and what started as a peaceful camping trip turned into a night of heart-pounding terror and moral dilemmas I never expected to face. I've been looking forward to this solo camping trip for months. Work had been brutal, my relationships were strained, and I desperately needed to disconnect from the world and reconnect with nature. The Savage River State Forest in western Maryland seemed like the perfect escape, remote enough to avoid crowds but with well-maintained trails for hiking. I arrived at the campground late Friday afternoon, the sun already dipping low behind the trees. As I set up my tent and organized my gear, I breathed in the crisp autumn air, feeling the tension in my shoulders start to ease. This was exactly what I needed. The first sign something was off came while I was gathering firewood about a quarter-mile from my campsite, just off the main road that wound through the forest. I spotted a car, an older model sedan, dusty and a bit beat up, pulled off to the side of the road. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe another camper had car trouble, or someone decided to do some off-trail hiking. But as I got closer, details started to nag at me. The car was empty, but the driver's side door was slightly ajar. Leaves and pine needles had collected on the hood and windshield, suggesting it had been there for at least a day or two. And there was something about the angle it was parked at, like it had been hastily pulled over. I debated whether to investigate further or alert the park rangers. In the end, I decided to head back to my campsite. I'd mention it to the rangers in the morning if the car was still there. No sense raising an alarm over what could be nothing. As night fell, I sat by my campfire, enjoying the peacefulness of the forest and the brilliant canopy of stars overhead. The worries of my daily life seemed far away, insignificant compared to the vastness of nature surrounding me. I was just about to turn in when a sound caught my attention, the distant rumble of an engine. I peered into the darkness, straining my eyes. After a few moments, I saw headlights appear on the road, moving slowly. The vehicle, it looked like a pickup truck, came to a stop near where I'd seen the abandoned car earlier. The headlights switched off, plunging the area back into darkness. Curiosity got the better of me. I doused my fire, grabbed my flashlight, and moved quietly through the trees toward the road. As I got closer, I could make out the shapes of two vehicles, the abandoned car and the newly arrived truck. That's when I saw the flashlights, too, maybe 3 beams of light moving around the abandoned car. I could hear voices, too, though I couldn't make out what they were saying. My heart started to race. This didn't feel right. I crouched behind a large oak tree, trying to get a better view without being seen. The voices became clearer as I strained my ears. "Can't believe they just left it here," one voice said, a man gruff and annoyed. "Amateurs," another replied with a snort. "Lucky for us. Let's just get it loaded up and get out of here." A chill ran down my spine. Whatever was happening, it was clear these guys weren't here to help the owner of the abandoned car. Were they thieves, or was something even more sinister going on? I watched, barely daring to breathe, as the men worked to attach a tow cable to the abandoned car. They moved with practiced efficiency, suggesting this wasn't their first time doing something like this. Just as they were finishing up, a twig snapped under my foot. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. The flashlight beam swung in my direction. "You hear that?" one of the men asked, his voice tense. "Probably just a deer," the other replied, but he didn't sound convinced. I pressed myself against the tree trunk, willing myself to become invisible. The flashlight beams swept back and forth, coming terrifyingly close to my hiding spot. I could hear footsteps crunching through the leaves, getting closer. Just when I thought discovery was inevitable, an owl hooted loudly overhead. The men's attention snapped upward, and after a tense moment, they returned to their task. "Let's hurry up and get out of here," one muttered. "This place gives me the creeps." I stayed frozen, hardly daring to breathe, as they finished hooking up the car. The sound of engines starting broke the silence of the night, and I watched as both vehicles, the truck and the towed car, disappeared down the road. As their taillights faded into the distance, I let out a shaky breath. My mind was racing. What had I just witnessed? A simple car theft? Or was it connected to something bigger, something more dangerous? I stumbled back to my campsite, my earlier peace shattered. Should I pack up and leave? Should I try to report what I'd seen? But report what exactly? I had no proof, no details about the men or their truck. For all I knew, they could have been legitimate tow truck operators, though my gut told me otherwise. Sleep eluded me that night. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves had me sitting bolt upright, sure that the men had returned and discovered my presence. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, I made my decision. I had to tell someone what I'd seen. I broke camp quickly, my hands shaking slightly as I packed up my gear. The hike back to the ranger station felt impossibly long, every shadow seeming to hide a potential threat. When I finally burst through the door, the startled ranger on duty must have thought I was crazy. "Sir, calm down," he said, holding up his hands as I babbled out my story. "Let's start from the beginning." I took a deep breath and recounted what I'd seen as calmly as I could. The abandoned car, the men arriving in the night, the hushed conversation, and the car being towed away. With each detail, the ranger's expression grew more serious. "You did the right thing coming to us," he said when I'd finished. He picked up his radio, calling for backup and putting out an alert for the vehicles I described. What followed was a whirlwind of police interviews, written statements, and a thorough search of the area where I'd seen the abandoned car. They found trace evidence, tire tracks, a dropped flashlight, that corroborated my story. It wasn't until several days later that I learned the full impact of what I'd witnessed. The abandoned car had belonged to a young woman who'd gone missing while hiking in the area. The men I saw that night were part of a car theft ring, but in stealing that particular vehicle, they had unwittingly removed crucial evidence in a potential kidnapping case. Thanks to my report, the authorities were able to track down the stolen car and the men responsible. While they claimed no knowledge of the missing woman, evidence found in the vehicle eventually led to her rescue from a human trafficking operation. The gravity of what could have happened if I'd simply ignored the situation and gone to sleep that night still haunts me. One small decision to investigate a strange noise in the darkness had potentially saved a life. I still go camping, still seek out the peace of nature when life gets too overwhelming, but now I go with a heightened awareness of my surroundings, a knowledge that even in the most remote places, human darkness can intrude. More than that, though, I carry with me the understanding that we all have the power to make a difference. It's easy to turn a blind eye, to convince ourselves something isn't our problem or that we're powerless to help. But sometimes the simple act of paying attention and speaking up can change everything. That night in the forest taught me that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid but choosing to act anyway. It's about trusting your instincts and stepping into the unknown for the sake of doing what's right. As I sit here reflecting on that night, I'm reminded of a quote I once read. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. In the face of suspicion and fear, I chose to do something. And while the memory of that night still sends a shiver down my spine, I know that if faced with the same situation again, I'd make the same choice in a heartbeat. The backpack was caked in dried blood, its straps torn and frayed. As I held it in my trembling hands, a chill ran down my spine. We were miles from civilization, the sun was setting, and the eerie feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. Little did I know our decision to do the right thing would turn this hiking trip into a fight for survival. My name's Amanda, and what started as a fun weekend getaway with friends became a terrifying ordeal that still haunts my dreams. It was supposed to be a chance to unwind and reconnect. My best friends from college, Jess, Mike, and Chris, and I had been planning this hiking trip for months. We'd chosen a challenging trail in the Adirondack Mountains, eager to test our limits and enjoy the breathtaking views we'd heard so much about. The first day of our hike was everything we'd hoped for. The weather was perfect, crisp and clear, with just enough of a breeze to keep us cool as we climbed. We laughed, shared stories, and marveled at the stunning vistas that opened up before us. As the day wore on and our muscles ached pleasantly from the exertion, we felt that unique satisfaction that comes from pushing yourself in nature. We were about halfway through our planned route when we decided to take a short detour. There was a small waterfall marked on our map, just a mile or so off the main trail. It seemed like the perfect spot for a late afternoon break before we started looking for a place to camp for the night. The side trail was less maintained than the main path, overgrown in places and steep in others, but the sound of rushing water urged us on. As we rounded a final bend, the trees opened up to reveal a picturesque scene, a small but powerful waterfall cascading down a rocky cliff face into a crystal-clear pool below. "This is incredible," Jess exclaimed, already shrugging off her backpack to get a better look. We were all so captivated by the beauty of the spot that at first, we didn't notice anything amiss. It wasn't until Mike went to refill our water bottles at the edge of the pool that he saw it. "Guys," he called, his voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "You need to see this." We gathered around him, and that's when I saw the backpack. It was half hidden behind a large rock, as if it had been tossed there in haste, but it was the dark stains covering much of its surface that made my stomach churn. Blood. There was no mistaking it. Chris, always the most level-headed of our group, was the first to approach it. With careful movements, he used a stick to pull the bag out from its hiding place. Up close, the damage was even more apparent. One of the straps was nearly severed, and there were what looked like claw marks raking across the fabric. "What do you think happened?" Jess whispered, voicing the question we were all thinking. "Bear attack, maybe?" Mike suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. I shook my head. Something about this felt off. The placement of the bag, the way it was hidden, this didn't feel like an animal attack. "We need to report this," I said firmly. "Someone could be hurt. Or worse." There was a moment of hesitation. We were at least a day's hike from the nearest ranger station, and none of us had cell service this deep in the mountains. Investigating further or carrying the backpack with us could be dangerous if there was indeed a bear in the area. But the thought of someone out there, possibly injured and alone, spurred us into action. We carefully packed the blood-stained backpack into a plastic bag Chris had brought for trash and secured it to the outside of his pack. Our break forgotten, we quickly gathered our gear and started back toward the main trail. The carefree mood of earlier had evaporated. replaced by a tense silence broken only by the crunch of our boots on the rocky path. As we hiked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snapping twig had me jumping. We'd been walking for about an hour, the sun now hanging low on the horizon, when Jess suddenly stopped short. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her eyes wide. We all froze, straining our ears. For a moment, there was nothing but the normal sounds of the forest. Then, faintly, I heard it, a crack, like a branch breaking, too heavy to be a small animal. "It's probably just a deer," Mike said, but his voice lacked conviction. We picked up our pace, the feeling of unease growing with each step. The shadows were lengthening, the forest taking on that eerie quality that comes with twilight. We needed to find a place to camp soon, but the thought of stopping, of being vulnerable in the growing darkness, filled me with dread. That's when we heard the whistle, a single clear note that cut through the air like a knife. It was unmistakably human and unmistakably close. "Hello," Chris called out, his voice echoing through the trees. "Is someone there?" We found a backpack. "We're trying to get help." Silence fell again, heavy and oppressive. We stood there, hardly daring to breathe, waiting for a response. But none came. "We should keep moving," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "We need to get to the ranger station." No one argued. We set off again, our steps quicker now, fueled by a growing sense of panic. The light was fading fast, and we were still miles from help. It was fully dark by the time we heard the whistle again. This time, it was answered by another, coming from a different direction. They were behind us, and in front of us. "Run," Mike said, and we did. We tore down the trail, guided only by the thin beams of our headlamps. Branches whipped at our faces, roots threatened to trip us with every step, but fear drove us on, the sound of pursuit growing ever closer. I don't know how long we ran. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the darkness and panic, but eventually, gasping for breath, we burst into a small clearing. And there, like a beacon of hope, was a small cabin. Without hesitation, we raced for the door. It was locked, but Chris, running on pure adrenaline, managed to force it open with a powerful shoulder charge. We tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind us. For a long moment, we just stood there in the darkness, our ragged breathing the only sound. Then Jess fumbled for her flashlight, illuminating our surroundings. The cabin was sparse but solidly built, a single room with a small wood stove, a couple of bunks, and a table with chairs. A basic shelter for forest rangers or emergency use. Right now, it felt like a fortress. As our panic began to subside, replaced by weary exhaustion, we took stock of our situation. We were safe for the moment, but trapped. Our pursuers, whoever they were still out there, and we still had the blood-stained backpack, evidence of what we now suspected was a very human crime. We took turns keeping watch through the night, jumping at every sound from the forest outside, but no one came for us. No one tried to break in. As the first light of dawn filtered through the cabin's grimy windows, we faced a difficult decision. "We can't stay here," Chris said, voicing what we were all thinking. "We need to make a run for the ranger station." It was risky. Whoever was after us was still out there, possibly waiting for us to emerge. But we were low on food and water, and we had no way of calling for help from the cabin. It was our only choice. We stepped out into the early morning light, every sense on high alert. The forest seemed peaceful, birds singing their dawn chorus as if the terrors of the night had never happened. But we knew better. We set a punishing pace, stopping only for brief rests when absolutely necessary. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves had us scanning our surroundings, ready to bolt at the first sign of pursuit. It was late afternoon when we finally stumbled into the ranger station, exhausted and on the verge of collapse. The shocked rangers quickly called for backup as we poured out our story, presenting the blood-stained backpack as evidence. In the days that followed, as we gave statements to the police and tried to process what had happened, the full story emerged. The backpack belonged to a hiker who had gone missing a week earlier. Our discovery and subsequent flight had disrupted a criminal operation using the remote trails for drug smuggling. Thanks to our actions, the authorities were able to uncover and shut down the smuggling ring. The missing hiker was found alive, though injured, having escaped from the criminals and hidden in the wilderness. As I sit here now, months later, I still find myself startled by unexpected noises, still feel that prickle of being watched when I'm alone in nature. But I don't regret our decision to help, to do the right thing despite the danger. That night in the mountains taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and acting anyway. It's about standing up for what's right, even when every instinct is screaming at you to run and hide. I still go hiking, still seek out the beauty and challenge of nature, but now I go with a deeper appreciation for the wild, a respect for its dangers, both natural and man-made. And I carry with me the knowledge that even in our darkest moments, when fear threatens to overwhelm us, we have the strength to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is the courage to pick up a fallen backpack and carry it to safety. The sound of metal scraping against metal jolted me awake. My heart raced as I realized someone was trying to break into my car in the pitch-black wilderness, miles from civilization. I was suddenly terrifyingly aware of just how vulnerable I was. My name's Ryan, and what started as a peaceful solo camping trip turned into a night of sheer terror and a desperate fight for survival. I've been looking forward to this trip for months. Work had been brutal, my relationship had just ended messily, and I desperately needed to disconnect from the world and reconnect with nature. The Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania seemed like the perfect escape, vast, remote, and beautiful. I arrived at my chosen campsite late Friday afternoon. It was more isolated than I'd expected, accessible only by a narrow, winding dirt road that snaked through dense forest. But as I set up my tent and organized my gear, I felt the tension in my shoulders start to ease. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the occasional call of a distant bird. This was exactly what I needed. That first evening was perfect. I built a small fire, cooked a simple meal, and sat back to watch the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The Milky Way stretched across the heavens, more vivid than I'd ever seen it in the city. As I sipped the last of my coffee, I felt truly at peace for the first time in months. I turned in early, lulled to sleep by the gentle crackling of the dying fire and the soft hooting of an owl somewhere in the forest. My last thought before drifting off was how glad I was that I'd decided to take this trip. The sound that woke me came shortly after midnight. At first, in my groggy state, I couldn't place it, a metallic scraping followed by a muffled thud. Then it came again, and with a jolt of adrenaline, I realized what it was. Someone was trying to break into my car. I lay frozen in my sleeping bag, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard outside the tent. The sounds continued, more urgent now. The rattle of the door handle being tried, the scrape of something, maybe a crowbar, being wedged into the window frame. My mind raced. Who could be out here? I hadn't seen another soul since turning off the main highway hours ago. And why my car? It wasn't particularly valuable, just a reliable old Subaru that could handle the forest roads. I needed to do something, but what? I had no weapon, no way to defend myself if I confronted whoever was out there. And even if I managed to scare them off, then what? I was miles from help with no cell service to call for assistance. Just as I was working up the courage to at least peek out of the tent, I heard a new sound, a crunch of footsteps moving away from the car and toward the forest. There was a final rustle of movement, then silence fell once again. For what felt like hours, I lay there, hardly daring to breathe. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves had me tensing, sure that the intruder was returning. But as the minutes ticked by and nothing happened, I slowly began to relax. Finally, when I could stand it no longer, I unzipped the tent as quietly as I could and peered out. The clearing was bathed in moonlight, casting long shadows across the ground. My car sat where I'd left it, looking undisturbed at first glance. But as I looked closer, I could see scratches around a driver's side lock and window. I grabbed my flashlight and, moving as silently as I could, made my way to the car. The damage was clear in the harsh beam of light. Someone had definitely tried to force their way in. But why? What could they have wanted? That's when I saw it, or rather, didn't see it. My backpack, which I'd left on the passenger seat, was gone. And with it, my car keys. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was stranded. No keys meant no way to start the car. no way to get out of here. And in that backpack had been my phone, my wallet, my everything. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as the full implications of my situation sank in. I was alone in the wilderness with no way to call for help and no transportation. My food and water supplies were limited to what I'd brought for the weekend, and somewhere out there, someone who clearly had no qualms about theft was roaming the forest. I retreated to my tent, mind racing. Should I try to hike out? The nearest town was at least 20 miles away through dense forest and rough terrain. And what if the thief was still out there, watching and waiting? Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night sitting up, flashlight in hand, jumping at every sound. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, I made my decision. I had to try to hike out. It was my only chance. I packed up what I could carry, my remaining food and water, a basic first aid kit, and A0X0A small hatchet I'd brought for chopping firewood. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. Just as I was about to set off, movement at the edge of the clearing caught my eye. There, half hidden behind a large oak tree, was a figure. My breath caught in my throat as we locked eyes. It was a man, wild-looking with a tangled beard and dirty clothes. In his hand, unmistakable even at this distance, was my backpack. For a long moment, we stared at each other, frozen in a tableau of fear and surprise. Then, with a speed that seemed impossible for his ragged appearance, he turned and sprinted into the forest. Without thinking, I gave chase. "Stop!" I yelled, crashing through the underbrush after him. "I just want my keys." But he was fast, clearly familiar with the terrain in a way I wasn't. I caught glimpses of him through the trees, always just out of reach. My lungs burned and branches whipped at my face, but I pressed on, driven by desperation and anger. I don't know how long I ran. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the green twilight of the dense forest, but eventually I burst into a small clearing and skidded to a halt. The man was there, standing at the far edge, my backpack clutched to his chest. But he wasn't alone. 2 other men stood with him, both as wild-looking as the first. Behind them, barely visible through the trees, I could make out what looked like a ramshackle camp, tattered tents, and a smoldering fire. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite my heaving breaths. "I don't want any trouble. I just need my keys and my phone. You can keep everything else." The men exchanged glances. The one holding my backpack took a step forward. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "This is our place. We don't like visitors." "I didn't know," I replied, hands raised in what I hoped was a non-threatening gesture. "I'm sorry. I'll leave as soon as I get my keys. Please." For a tense moment, no one moved. I was acutely aware of how outnumbered I was, of how far from help I'd run in my rashness. But just as I was considering making a break for it, the man sighed and reached into my backpack. He tossed my keys and phone to the ground in front of me. "Take them and go," he said. "And don't come back. Next time, we won't be so nice." I didn't need to be told twice. I scooped up my belongings and backed away slowly, not turning my back on the men until I was well into the trees. Then I ran, crashing through the forest with no regard for stealth or direction. All I cared about was putting as much distance between myself and that camp as possible. By some miracle, I managed to find my way back to my campsite. I threw my gear into the car and peeled out of there, tires spitting gravel. It wasn't until I was back on the main highway, civilization in sight, that I finally allowed myself to relax. In the days that followed, as I tried to process what had happened, I learned that the Allegheny National Forest had a history of forest people, individuals and small groups who lived off the grid, often hiding from society for various reasons. While usually harmless, they fiercely guarded their privacy and territory. I reported my experience to the park rangers, but without concrete evidence of a crime. They had, after all, returned my most valuable possessions. There wasn't much they could do. I was left with a mixture of relief at my narrow escape and a lingering unease about what might have happened if things had gone differently. That weekend changed me. I still love nature, still seek out the peace of wild places, but now I go with a heightened awareness of the fact that even in the most remote locations, we're never truly alone. There are always others out there, some seeking solitude like me, others hiding from a world they can't or won't be a part of. Most importantly, I learned that the line between civilization and wilderness, between safety and danger, is far thinner than we like to believe. It's a lesson I carry with me, a reminder to always be prepared, to trust my instincts, and to remember that sometimes the most dangerous things in the forest aren't the animals. They're the other humans seeking refuge in its depths. The scream pierced the night, a sound so raw and terrified it made my blood run cold. I sat bolt upright in our tent, my partner's hand gripping my arm tightly. One chilling thought ran through my mind. We were not alone in these woods, and whatever was out there was far more dangerous than any animal. My name's Olivia, and what was meant to be a romantic getaway with my boyfriend Jake turned into a nightmare that still haunts my dreams. We've been planning this camping trip for months. Both of us worked high-stress jobs in the city, and we desperately needed to reconnect with each other and with nature. We chose a remote spot in the Ozark National Forest, far from the usual tourist trails. The promise of pristine wilderness and starry nights, uninterrupted by light pollution or the constant buzz of civilization, was irresistible. We arrived at our chosen campsite late Friday afternoon. The drive had been long, the last hour on increasingly narrow and rough forest roads, but as we stepped out of the car and breathed in the crisp mountain air, scented with pine and wild herbs, I felt the tension of the work week start to melt away. "This is perfect," Jake said, wrapping an arm around my waist and pulling me close. I leaned into him, savoring the moment of peace. We set up camp efficiently, working together to pitch our tent and organize our gear. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Jake got a fire going while I prepared a simple dinner of campfire chili. That first evening was everything we'd hoped for. We sat by the fire, talking and laughing, sharing a bottle of wine we'd brought for the occasion. The stars came out, more brilliant than I'd ever seen them. A glittering canopy stretched across the inky black sky. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet majesty of nature with a man I loved by my side, I felt truly content. We turned in relatively early, tired from the drive and eager to get an early start on hiking the next day. The night was cool, and we snuggled close in our double sleeping bag, the soft sound of Jake's breathing quickly lulling me to sleep. I'm not sure how long I'd been asleep when the scream jolted me awake. At first, in my groggy state, I thought I must have dreamed it, but then it came again, closer this time, a sound of pure terror that set my heart racing. "Jake," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Did you hear that?" He was already awake, his body tense beside me. "Yeah," he said, his voice tight. "What the hell was that?" We lay still, hardly daring to breathe, straining our ears. For a long moment, there was only silence, broken by the normal sounds of the forest at night, the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl. Just as I was starting to think we'd imagined it, we heard it again. This time, it wasn't a scream but a low, pained moan, followed by what sounded like someone crashing through the underbrush. "We need to help," I said, already reaching for the tent zipper. Jake caught my hand. "Wait," he said. "We don't know what's out there. It could be dangerous." I hesitated. He had a point. We were miles from any help, with no cell service. If something went wrong... Another cry split the night closer now. It sounded human, and it sounded desperate. "We can't just sit here," I said firmly. "Someone could be hurt." Jake nodded, his face a mixture of fear and determination. "Okay, but we stick together, and we bring the bear spray." We emerged from the tent cautiously, flashlights sweeping the darkness. The forest, which had seemed so peaceful earlier, now felt oppressive and threatening. Shadows danced between the trees, and every snapping twig made us jump. We moved in the direction we thought the sounds had come from, calling out as we went. "Hello? Is someone there? Do you need help?" There was no response, just the eerie silence of the forest. We pressed on, the beams of our flashlights catching on gnarled tree roots and dense underbrush. The further we went from our campsite, the more uneasy I felt. Something about this didn't feel right. We'd been searching for about 15 minutes when Jake suddenly stopped short. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Look." I followed his gaze and felt my blood turn to ice. There, illuminated in the harsh beam of his flashlight, were deep gouges in the trunk of a massive oak tree. They looked like claw marks, but they were far too high and too large to have been made by any animal native to these woods. Maybe a bear stood up on its hind legs, I suggested, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Jake shook his head slowly. No bear I've ever heard of could reach that high. And look at the depth of those marks. Whatever made them was strong. Really strong. A twig snapped somewhere to our left, and we both whirled toward the sound, hearts pounding. The beam of our flashlights caught a flash of movement, something large, darting between the trees. "We need to go," Jake said, grabbing my hand. Now, we turned to head back to our campsite, but in our panic, nothing looked familiar. The trees all blended together, and in the darkness, every direction looked the same. "Do you know which way we came from?" I asked, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. Before Jake could answer, we heard it again, that blood-curdling scream, this time so close it felt like it was right on top of us. And it was answered by another cry, coming from a different direction. We ran. I don't know if we were running toward our camp or deeper into the forest. All I knew was that we had to get away from whatever was out there. Branches whipped at our faces. Roots threatened to trip us, but terror drove us on. I don't know how long we ran. Time seemed to lose all meaning in the darkness and panic, but eventually, gasping for breath, we burst into a small clearing. And there, like a beacon of hope, was our tent. We dove inside, zipping it shut as if the thin fabric could offer any real protection. For a long while, we just sat there in the darkness, holding each other, our ragged breathing the only sound. As our panic began to subside, replaced by weary exhaustion, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. We were miles from any help, with no way to call for assistance, and something was out there, something that had no business existing in these woods. We took turns keeping watch through what remained of the night, jumping at every sound from the forest, but nothing approached our tent. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, we faced a difficult decision. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, voicing what we were both thinking. "Pack up and hike out as quickly as we can." I nodded, the memory of those claw marks and that inhuman scream still fresh in my mind. We broke camp in record time, constantly scanning our surroundings for any sign of movement. The hike back to our car was tense, every snapping twig and rustle of leaves setting our nerves on edge. But we encountered nothing out of the ordinary, and by early afternoon, we were speeding down the forest road, eager to put as much distance between us and that place as possible. We reported our experience to the park rangers, but I could tell from their skeptical expressions that they didn't believe us. They suggested we might have heard a mountain lion or maybe other campers playing a prank. But I know what we heard, what we saw. It was like nothing that should exist in this world. In the weeks that followed, as we tried to process what had happened, we scoured the internet for any similar reports from the area. We found a few vague stories, whispered legends of something that stalked the deepest parts of the forest, but nothing concrete, nothing that could explain what we'd encountered. That night changed us. We still go camping, still seek out the beauty of nature, but now we go with a heightened awareness of the fact that the wilderness holds secrets, things that defy explanation. We're more cautious, more prepared, always aware that beyond the circle of our campfire, in the darkest depths of the forest, there might be something watching, waiting. Most importantly, we learn that sometimes the most terrifying things aren't what we can see, but what remains hidden in the shadows, leaving only traces of its passing and the lingering echo of a scream in the night. The camera clicked, freezing the desolate main street of Blackwood Creek in time. Little did I know, it would be the last photograph Daniel ever took. In that single haunting instant, he captured more than just an abandoned town, caught a glimpse of his own chilling fate. My name is Chloe, and I'm a photo editor for Wanderlust magazine. Daniel was one of our most gifted photographers, renowned for his ability to find beauty in forgotten corners of the world, for his truly haunting images of decay and desolation. When he pitched a series on America's abandoned ghost towns, I knew it had the potential to be truly extraordinary, a groundbreaking collection. I just never ever imagined it would end with him becoming a ghost himself. It was supposed to be a straightforward assignment, a routine venture. Daniel was scheduled to spend a month traversing various abandoned towns, meticulously capturing their eerie, melancholic beauty and the silent stories left behind within their crumbling, decaying structures. He'd undertaken similar projects before, always returning with breathtaking images that spoke volumes, each photo a narrative in itself. The initial 2 weeks of the assignment proceeded without a hitch, smoothly and predictably. Daniel sent regular updates, along with enticing previews of his developing shots. His photographs of crumbling weather houses in an old mining town and an eerily silent, abandoned amusement park were particularly striking, each one a testament to his unique eye. But it was his next destination that would irrevocably alter everything, changing the course of our lives and Daniel's journey. Oak Haven, a tiny, forgotten town nestled deep in the heart of the Midwest, had been abruptly abandoned in the mid-1950s. The official narrative, the one everyone was told, was that the local factory, the town's lifeblood, had suddenly shut down, forcing everyone to leave in a desperate search for work elsewhere. However, there were persistent whispers, hushed rumors of something far darker, something more sinister lurking beneath the surface. Tales of unexplained disappearances, strange, fleeting sightings in the dense, surrounding woods that border the town. Daniel, ever the adventurous and curious soul, was absolutely thrilled about the potential for incredibly atmospheric, evocative shots. "This place is pure gold, Chloe," he'd exclaimed during our very last phone call, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. "I've never seen anything quite like it." It's as if the entire town just froze, just stopped dead in its tracks. I could hear the genuine enthusiasm radiating in his voice, the same raw passion that made him such an exceptional, unparalleled photographer. "Just be careful," I'd warned him, a slight tremor in my own voice. "Some of those old buildings might not be structurally sound, Daniel. They could be dangerous." Daniel had simply laughed, a light, carefree sound. "Don't worry, I'm not planning on doing any urban exploring. The exteriors alone are absolutely incredible, worth the trip entirely." That, tragically, was the last time I ever heard his voice, the last time I spoke to my friend. 3 days later, when I hadn't received any new updates or, more importantly, any new photos, a knot of worry began to tighten in my stomach. It was entirely unlike Daniel to go silent, to break contact. I tried calling his cell phone repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail, an ominous sign. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself he was probably just in a remote area with poor cell reception, a common occurrence in the places he explored. But a persistent, cold, nagging feeling deep in my gut told me otherwise, whispered a darker truth. By the 5th day of silence, a chilling certainty settled over me. Something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. I contacted the local authorities near Oak Haven, but they seemed oddly reluctant, even dismissive, to offer any real assistance. "Folks go into that old town all the time," the grizzled sheriff had told me, his tone annoyingly casual. "They always come out eventually, ma'am." His casual dismissal, his utter lack of concern, only heightened my alarm, intensified my growing fear. I made an immediate decision. I had to go to Oak Haven myself. I told my boss it was simply to check on the progress of the shoot to ensure the project was on track. But in reality, I was terrified, gripped by the chilling premonition that something truly awful had befallen Daniel. The drive to Oak Haven was long, arduous, and increasingly isolated. As I approached the town, the landscape gradually transformed, becoming more desolate, more unsettling. The roads became narrower, less maintained, eventually turning into little more than cracked, overgrown paths. When I finally saw the faded, weather-beaten "Welcome to Oak Haven" sign, half hidden by a tangle of overgrown, suffocating vegetation, a profound chill ran straight down my spine, an icy tendril of dread. The town itself was like something ripped directly from a post-apocalyptic movie, a scene of utter ruin and abandonment. Empty, silent streets stretched endlessly before me, lined on either side with dilapidated, collapsing buildings, their windows like vacant eyes. Nature was relentlessly reclaiming the town, slowly but surely. Trees grew defiantly through cracked sidewalks, their roots tearing apart the concrete. Thick, dark vines crawled relentlessly up the crumbling sides of houses, engulfing them. I parked my car at the very edge of town, hesitant, and began walking, my voice hoarse as I repeatedly called out Daniel's name. The silence was oppressive, suffocating, broken only by the loud crunch of gravel beneath my feet and the occasional mournful rustle of wind sighing through the skeletons of abandoned buildings, a ghostly whisper. As I explored deeper, I could perfectly understand why Daniel had been so utterly excited about this place, so captivated. Every single corner, every decaying structure, held a haunting tableau, a frozen moment in time. A child's rusty tricycle lay overturned in a front yard, a poignant reminder of lost innocence. Dusty store windows still displayed faded, sun-bleached products long forgotten. A clock on the old town hall was inexplicably frozen at 3:27, eternally marking a moment of sudden cessation. It was as if the entire population had simply vanished in an instant, utterly gone. I eventually found Daniel's car, parked conspicuously near what must have once been the town square, a central gathering point. His equipment bag, typically filled with precious lenses and camera bodies, was still visible in the back seat, strangely untouched. But there was no sign of Daniel himself, no trace of his presence. A cold, paralyzing fear gripped me as I realized the terrible truth. He must have ventured deeper into the town on foot, his curiosity leading him into danger. As the day wore on, slowly giving way to evening, and my frantic search yielded absolutely nothing, I became increasingly desperate, a gnawing anxiety growing within me. I meticulously checked every single building I could safely enter, calling Daniel's name until my voice was hoarse and raw, strained from the effort. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long, distorted shadows across the empty, silent streets, I knew with a dreadful certainty that I had to leave, had to return with proper help, with authorities who could conduct a real search. That's when my eyes caught it, a glint of something metallic in the fading, dying light. My heart, already racing, pounded even harder as I cautiously approached. There, lying in the middle of the desolate street, was Daniel's camera. It looked remarkably undamaged, pristine almost, as if it had been gently, deliberately placed there rather than carelessly dropped. With shaking, trembling hands, I picked it up, the cold metal a stark contrast to my feverish skin, and cautiously turned it on. The battery was almost completely dead, but miraculously, there was just enough power remaining to access the most recent photos. I scrolled through them quickly, my breath hitched, seeing Oakhaven through Daniel's expert, artistic eye, hauntingly beautiful shots of profound decay and utter abandonment, each frame a masterpiece of desolation. And then I reached the last photograph. It showed an empty street, eerily similar, almost identical to the very one I was standing on at that moment. But there, at the extreme edge of the frame, was a distinct figure. It was blurry, indistinct, as if caught in hurried motion, but unmistakably human-shaped, a dark silhouette against the muted background. A profound chill, a bone-deep tremor, ran through me as the horrifying realization dawned. This blurry figure must have been the very last thing Daniel saw. The final image burned into his retinas, before he simply vanished. I instinctively looked up from the camera, scanning the street directly before me, every nerve ending tingling. It was absolutely identical to the one in the photo, a perfect match. Whatever Daniel had seen, whatever unspeakable thing had happened to him, it had transpired right here, on this very spot. As if on cue, a sound reached my ears, the distinct, unnerving sound of footsteps, coming from somewhere just behind me. I spun around violently, my heart leaping into my throat, half expecting, half hoping, to see Daniel standing there, alive and well. But the street was utterly empty, devoid of any presence. Yet the footsteps continued, a chilling echo bouncing off the abandoned buildings, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, surrounding me. Terror, pure and unadulterated, finally overtook me, consuming my last vestiges of calm. I ran back to my car, sprinting as fast as my legs would carry me, Daniel's camera clutched tightly, protectively, to my chest. As I sped away from Oakhaven, the dilapidated buildings fading into the darkening twilight, I could have sworn, truly sworn, I saw a lone figure standing eerily in the middle of the road in my rearview mirror. But when I blinked, it was gone, vanished like a wisp of smoke. The next few weeks were a disorienting blur of police reports, fruitless search parties, and increasingly desperate, futile attempts to locate Daniel, to bring him home. I showed the authorities the last photograph, the one of the blurry figure, but they quickly dismissed it, attributing it to a trick of the light, a mere camera malfunction, or even my own stressed imagination. They conducted a thorough, but ultimately unyielding search of Oak Haven and the expansive surrounding area, but found absolutely no trace of Daniel, no clue whatsoever. As the weeks inexorably stretched into months, the case, like so many before it, went cold, filed away, forgotten by most. Wanderlust magazine eventually ran a somber tribute to Daniel, celebrating his extraordinary work and mourning his profound loss, a talented life cut short. But I wouldn't let it go. I kept returning to that last photo, meticulously studying every single pixel, scrutinizing it for any hidden clues, any missed details that might unlock the terrifying mystery. I've been back to Oak Haven several times since then, drawn by an irresistible, unsettling pull, always hoping, always praying, to finally find some answers, some closure. Each time I return, I feel an undeniable sensation of being watched, an invisible gaze upon me, as if the town itself is harboring some terrible, unspeakable secret, guarding it fiercely. I've heard the footsteps again, those same chilling sounds, always just out of sight, always tantalizingly close yet unreachable. Once, I even thought I caught a fleeting glimpse of Daniel himself, standing eerily at the end of a long, deserted street. But when I ran towards him, my heart pounding with a surge of hope, he simply vanished, dissipating into the oppressive atmosphere. The few locals who live in the scattered, outlying areas near Oak Haven studiously avoid talking about it. When pressed, their faces become grim, and they mutter evasively about ancient legends, about people mysteriously going missing over the years, a chilling tradition. Some whisper that the town is cursed, that it demands a toll, taking people to replace those who long ago abandoned it. Others, with wide, frightened eyes, claim there's a hidden portal to another dimension, concealed somewhere within the decaying, abandoned buildings, a gateway to an unknown realm. I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. My rational mind battles with the inexplicable. All I know for certain is that Daniel went to Oak Haven to capture images of a ghost town, and instead, tragically, he became a ghost himself. His last photo still hangs prominently on my wall, a constant, haunting reminder of the unsolved mystery that utterly consumed my dear friend, a silent testament to his disappearance. Sometimes late at night, when the house is still and silent, I find myself staring intensely at that blurry figure in the background of the photo. And sometimes, just sometimes, I could swear it's staring back at me, its unseen eyes fixed on mine. The truth about what truly happened to Daniel, about what's really going on in Oak Haven, is still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. And I won't rest, I cannot rest, until I uncover it, until I find the answers, no matter where that terrifying, uncertain journey might lead me. Because in that forgotten town, that place where time seems to stand still, frozen forever, my friend simply vanished without a trace, leaving behind an unbearable void. And his story, like the town itself, utterly refuses to be forgotten. The elevator doors silently closed, and Maria vanished. One moment she was there, clipboard in hand, a slight smile on her face, ready for her night shift. The next, she was simply gone, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a hospital full of hushed, unsettling whispers. I'm Dr. Edward Cole, and I was on duty the night Maria disappeared. It was a quiet Tuesday evening at St. Jude Hospital, the kind of night where the gentle hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional rhythmic beep of a monitor were the loudest, most dominant sounds echoing through the long, sterile corridors. Maria had just started her shift, her auburn hair meticulously tied back in a neat, professional ponytail, her scrubs crisp and impeccably clean. Heading up to pediatrics, she'd said with a cheerful, optimistic smile, stepping confidently into the elevator on the ground floor. "See you for coffee later, Dr. Cole." I nodded, returning her smile, a familiar ritual. Wouldn't miss it. Those, chillingly, were the very last words I ever heard from Maria, the final exchange. If I had known, if I had had even the slightest inkling, I would have said something more meaningful, something profound, something that truly mattered, that carried weight. But how possibly could I have known? It was about an hour later when the first subtle prick of unease, the first inkling that something was wrong, began to settle over me. A call came down from the pediatrics department. They were short-staffed, in need of assistance, and specifically requested Maria. But Maria hadn't shown up for her shift, hadn't arrived on the ward. At first, we simply assumed there had been some clerical mix-up with the scheduling, a common, irritating occurrence, especially during the chaotic night shifts. But when we meticulously checked the roster, Maria was undeniably, definitively on the schedule. She had badged in at the very start of her shift, the system confirming her presence. She absolutely should have been there. I distinctly remember the growing, palpable sense of dread as we began to methodically search the entire hospital, floor by floor, ward by ward. We checked every single floor, every patient ward, every cramped supply closet, every hidden nook and cranny. Nothing. It was as if Maria had simply evaporated into thin air, leaving no trace behind. The security team quickly got involved, reviewing the extensive camera footage from every corner of the hospital. That's when things took an immediate bizarre turn, plunging us into the truly inexplicable. The security cameras clearly showed Maria entering the elevator on the ground floor, precisely as I'd witnessed her. But, astoundingly, she never exited. Not on any floor. The elevator ascended to pediatrics on the 5th floor. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, but the cabin inside was utterly, chillingly empty. Maria was gone. I watched that footage over and over again, my mind struggling desperately to comprehend what my eyes were seeing, grappling with the impossible. People don't just disappear, especially not within the confines of a hospital, one of the most monitored, controlled environments imaginable. But the undeniable, irrefutable evidence was right there, staring back at me. Maria had entered the elevator and had simply never, ever come out. The police were, of course, immediately called. They swiftly cordoned off the offending elevator, treating the entire hospital like a sprawling, active crime scene. They interviewed absolutely everyone: staff, patients, visitors, security guards. But no one, not a single soul, had seen anything remotely unusual, anything out of place. No one could offer a shred of explanation as to how a nurse could possibly vanish from a moving elevator without a trace, without triggering any alarms or leaving any physical evidence. As the arduous investigation dragged on, day after agonizing day, various theories, wild and improbable, began to circulate like a virulent infection. Some speculated that Maria must have somehow impossibly slipped out of the elevator between floors, a feat that would have required superhuman agility and impossible timing, and would still not explain the lack of alarms. Others, with hushed, fearful whispers, spoke of hidden passages within the old hospital's ancient walls, secret rooms where someone could conceal themselves or be concealed. The more superstitious among the staff, those prone to believing in the unseen, started talking openly about ghosts, about chilling tales of how the hospital was built on an old, forgotten cemetery, and how sometimes, late at night, you could hear strange, mournful noises emanating from deep within the walls and ethereal wailing. I didn't believe in any of that, of course. I'm a doctor, a man of science, grounded in logic and reason. But as days slowly, agonizingly turned into weeks, with still no sign of Maria, no hint of her whereabouts, I found myself grasping desperately for any explanation, no matter how far-fetched, how utterly improbable. The case of Maria's disappearance utterly consumed my life. I couldn't sleep, haunted by her memory. I couldn't eat. My appetite vanished. Every single time I walked past that cursed elevator, a cold, icy chill ran down my spine, a shiver of dread. I kept irrationally expecting to see Maria suddenly step out, laughing, explaining it had all been some elaborate, cruel prank, a misunderstanding. But she never did. It was about a month after Maria's disappearance that the first truly strange, inexplicable incident occurred. I was working another draining night shift, diligently making my rounds, checking on patients, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of Maria's gentle, melodic laughter echoing distinctly down an otherwise empty, silent corridor. I immediately ran towards the sound, my heart pounding furiously against my ribs, a desperate hope surging through me. But I found nothing. Just an empty, sterile hallway. The only sound the ragged, desperate echo of my own breathing bouncing off the cold, hard walls. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that the relentless stress, the profound grief, and the severe lack of sleep were finally getting to me, distorting my perceptions. But then it happened again and again, always at night, always when the hospital was at its quietest, most vulnerable. Sometimes it was Maria's distinctive laugh, a ghost of a sound. sometimes the faint, ethereal sound of her voice, calling out an indistinguishable word. Once I could have sworn I smelled her unique perfume, a delicate, distinctive scent of lavender and vanilla, wafting unmistakably from an empty patient room, a scent that lingered in the air before vanishing. Other staff members, those who remained, also started reporting similar, unsettling experiences. Nurses would catch fleeting glimpses of a figure clad in familiar scrubs, turning a corner just ahead, only to find no one there when they followed, the corridor empty. Patients, particularly those in the pediatric ward, whispered stories about a kind, gentle nurse with auburn hair who would visit them silently at night, comforting them, but who was never, ever there when the harsh overhead lights came on in the morning. The hospital, once a place of healing and order, gradually transformed into a place of hushed whispers and furtive, sidelong glances of unspoken fears. Staff members, increasingly unnerved, began requesting transfers to other facilities, citing unbearable stress and a profoundly uncomfortable, unsettling work environment. Those of us who remained, out of duty or a stubborn refusal to abandon the mystery, jumped at every unexpected sound, watching the elevators with weary, haunted eyes. As for me, I threw myself headfirst into trying to solve the mystery, to find answers, to bring Maria back. I spent countless hours poring over the hospital's intricate building blueprints, searching desperately for any hidden spaces, any unexplained structures, any secret passages that might shed light on her disappearance. I interviewed former employees, delved deep into old dusty hospital records, even to my own profound embarrassment, consulted with self-proclaimed paranormal investigators, desperate for any insight. But the breakthrough, when it finally arrived, was both far more mundane and infinitely more chilling than anything I could have ever imagined. It was exactly 1 year to the day after Maria's disappearance. I was working late, meticulously going over some patient files in my quiet office, when my computer, without warning, suddenly flickered and turned off. When it inexplicably rebooted itself, there was a new file on the desktop starkly prominent, a video file. With shaking, trembling hands, my heart hammering against my ribs, I clicked on it. The video was grainy, black and white, clearly captured by a security camera, the quality poor but discernible. It showed the interior of an elevator, the very same elevator Maria had vanished from. And there she was, standing silently in the corner of the small cabin, looking directly, hauntingly at the camera. She looked profoundly different, thinner, almost gaunt, her auburn hair disheveled, her eyes wide, dilated, and filled with an unbearable fear. She was speaking, her lips moving frantically, but there was absolutely no sound, no audio whatsoever. I watched, transfixed, mesmerized, as she gestured frantically, wildly, pointing at something just off camera, something unseen. And then suddenly, inexplicably, she was gone. Not gradually, not stepping out of frame, not dissolving slowly. One moment she was there, a terrified, living woman. The next, she simply wasn't. The video ended there, abruptly, leaving me in stunned, horrified silence, my mind reeling, struggling desperately to process what I had just witnessed. What had I seen? Was this some cruel, elaborate prank, a malicious joke? Or had I just witnessed the very moment of Maria's disappearance, somehow captured and inexplicably sent directly to me, exactly a year later? I immediately called the police, my voice hoarse, my hands still shaking, and handed over the perplexing video file. They were as utterly baffled as I was, their professional skepticism giving way to open confusion. The file could not be traced. It was as if it had simply appeared out of thin air, just as Maria herself had vanished. In the days that followed, experts meticulously analyzed the video, trying to make sense of the impossible. Lip readers were brought in. Their expertise sought to decipher what Maria was so desperately trying to say, her final words. Their chilling conclusions sent shivers of ice down my spine, cold dread that hasn't left me. According to them, Maria's last discernible words, the frantic movements of her lips, were, "It's here. It's coming. Don't let it take you to." What it was, what it meant, we still, to this day, don't know. The investigation into Maria's disappearance was officially reopened, a flicker of hope, but we are no closer to answers, no closer to understanding. The hospital, once a place of comfort and healing, has become a place of profound unease, a pervasive sense of dread, where staff and patients alike feel an unsettling sensation of being watched by unseen, malevolent eyes. As for me, I can't leave. I refuse to. Not until I truly know, what happened to Maria, what consumed her. Not until I understand what she was so desperately trying to warn us about, what terrifying entity lurks within the hospital's walls. Every single night, I walk the long, winding corridors of St. Jude's General, listening intently for her faint laughter, watching for a fleeting flash of auburn hair around a distant corner, a phantom presence. And every single time I step into an elevator, a cold dread washes over me, and I involuntarily hold my breath, half expecting, half terrified, to vanish just like she did, to be pulled into the same inexplicable void. Maria's disappearance remains a haunting mystery, a gaping wound that refuses to heal, a constant ache in my soul. But I won't give up. Somewhere in this sprawling hospital, in its labyrinthine corridors and hidden spaces, lies the terrifying truth. And one day, I will find it. For Maria's sake, and for the sake of all of us who are left behind, forever wondering what truly lurks in the shadows of St. Jude's General. Until then, the elevators continue to run, endlessly carrying passengers up and down, their mundane function now imbued with a chilling new significance. But now everyone watches the doors a little more closely, a little more fearfully, half expecting them to open onto something else entirely, something unknown, something terrifying, something that took Maria and might one day come for the rest of us. The storm erupted out of nowhere, a furious, unexpected wrath of nature, transforming the once calm, placid sea into a frothing, monstrous beast of churning waves and deafening wind. When the angry skies finally cleared, leaving behind a deceptively peaceful scene, Captain Ben's boat, the Sea Siren, bobbed quietly and innocently on the gentle waves, utterly empty save for a single, weathered fishing rod, still poised hopefully to catch the big one that would, tragically, never come. My name's Mike, and Ben was my best friend, my closest confidant. We've been fishing buddies for over 30 years, our friendship forged in the crucible of countless shared adventures, braving all kinds of treacherous weather and challenging waters together. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have possibly prepared us for that fateful, terrible day when the vast, enigmatic sea decided, inexplicably, to keep Ben for itself. It was supposed to be a routine fishing trip, an ordinary day out on the water, just like the hundreds, if not thousands, we'd embarked on before. Ben had called me the night before, his voice practically brimming with unbridled excitement, a boyish glee. "Mike, my boy," he'd boomed, his voice echoing with anticipation. "The bass are biting like crazy out there. We simply have to get out there tomorrow. Absolutely first thing. What do you say?" I'd agreed immediately, of course, a smile on my face, eager for the camaraderie and the thrill of the catch. But at the very last minute, my old back injury, a nagging pain from my demanding construction days, flared up unexpectedly, a sharp, debilitating spasm. I reluctantly called Ben to bow out, feeling a profound pang of guilt about leaving him to fish alone, to face the vast ocean without my company. "Don't you worry about me, Mike." Ben had laughed, his voice still carefree and lighthearted. "More fish for me, right? I'll bring you back a big one, a real trophy." Those, heartbreakingly, were the very last words I ever heard from him, the final echo of his cheerful spirit. The day started deceptively clear and bright, a perfect, serene morning for fishing, promising calm waters and abundant catches. I watched from my worn porch, a bittersweet feeling in my gut, as Ben's beloved little boat, the Sea Siren, proudly named after his late cherished wife, chugged steadily out of the harbor, a tiny speck against the vast expanse of the morning sea. I distinctly remember feeling a sharp pang of regret, a wistful longing, and not being out there with him, sharing the familiar ritual. It was around noon when the weather, without warning, underwent a dramatic, violent transformation. Dark, ominous clouds, bruised purple and heavy with foreboding, rolled in rapidly from the horizon, bringing with them winds that whipped the sea into an absolute frenzy, a chaotic maelstrom of whitecaps and spray. I've lived by this rugged coast my entire life, witnessing countless storms, but I had never ever seen a tempest come on so fast or unleash such a ferocious, untamed fury. As the torrential rain lashed relentlessly against my sturdy windows, blurring the world outside, I couldn't help but think of Ben, out there, alone, vulnerable. He was an incredibly experienced sailor, I reassured myself, a seasoned fisherman. He'd know instinctively to head back to shore to seek the safety of the harbor. But as the agonizing hours slowly passed, stretching into an eternity, and the storm showed absolutely no signs of abating, no hint of letting up its violent assault, a cold, sickening worry began to gnaw relentlessly at my gut, tightening its grip with each passing moment. By the time the Coast Guard finally got involved, alerted by my increasingly frantic calls, it was already dark, the night sky as black as pitch, devoid of stars. The storm had eventually passed, its fury spent, but it left behind violently choppy seas and a sky as black as tar, a lingering reminder of its destructive power. I insisted, my voice raw with emotion and urgency, on going out with the search party, my nagging back pain completely forgotten, utterly insignificant in the face of my best friend's possible peril. We searched tirelessly all night, our powerful spotlights cutting desperately through the inky blackness, our voices hoarse and strained from repeatedly calling Ben's name, shouting it into the void. As dawn finally broke, casting a pale, weak light over the still turbulent, restless sea, we at last spotted something in the distance, a faint shape on the horizon. The sea siren. She was floating peacefully, eerily serene, as if nothing, absolutely nothing, had happened, bobbing gently on the waves. My heart, filled with a sudden, desperate surge of hope, leaped into my throat as we cautiously approached. But as we drew closer, an immediate, profound sense of dread washed over me. I knew instinctively that something was terribly wrong. The boat was riding too high in the water, too light, an ominous sign. There was no visible sign of movement on deck, no hint of life. I was the very first to clamber aboard, my movements clumsy with urgency, calling out Ben's name, my voice cracking. But the small cabin was utterly empty. The deck was deserted, silent. The only tangible sign that Ben had been there at all was his favorite, well-worn fishing rod, still securely fastened in its holder, its lines stretched taut, incredibly, as if something had just moments ago taken the bait, a fish or something else. The Coast Guard conducted a thorough, meticulous search of the surrounding area, deploying divers and sonar, but found absolutely nothing. No life vest, no telltale debris, no body. It was as if Ben had simply vanished into thin air or into the cold, unforgiving depths of the sea itself. The official report, a cold, clinical document, labeled it as lost at sea, a tragic, unpreventable accident. But something about it, something deep in my gut, simply didn't sit right with me. Ben was too good a sailor, too experienced a fisherman, too cautious to just disappear like that, without a fight. And where was his life vest? He always wore it, no matter how calm the seas seemed, no matter how bright the sun. As days slowly, agonizingly turned into weeks, a profound emptiness settling over me, I found myself spending more and more time at the harbor, my gaze fixed on that precise spot on the horizon where we'd found the sea siren. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was missing something crucial, that there was something more, something far more sinister, to Ben's disappearance than a simple accident, a random act of nature. It was about a month after Ben vanished that the first bottle, an ordinary glass bottle, washed up on shore. I was walking slowly along the quiet beach, lost deep in thought, my mind replaying every detail of that terrible day, when I spotted it, a glint of glass in the sand. My hands, suddenly trembling with a mixture of fear and hope, shook uncontrollably as I carefully uncorked it and pulled out the rolled-up piece of paper inside. The paper was damp, slightly crinkled, and the ink was smudged, blurry in places, but the handwriting was utterly unmistakable. It was Ben's. The message was incredibly short, just a few words, hastily scrawled. Still out here? Don't give up on me. I took the bottle to the police, of course, my heart pounding with a desperate hope. They ran various tests, their faces impassive, but couldn't definitively determine how long it had been in the water, or precisely where it had come from. They tried to reassure me, telling me it was probably an old message, something Ben had perhaps tossed overboard on a previous uneventful trip that had just now, by sheer coincidence, washed ashore. But I knew better, deep in my soul. The paper wasn't weathered enough, not sufficiently degraded. The ink wasn't faded enough, still too legible. This message was recent, which meant I hardly dared to allow myself to hope, to entertain the possibility. But I couldn't deny it. What if Ben was still alive? Still out there somewhere, clinging to life, waiting to be found? Over the next few weeks, more bottles appeared, seemingly at random, each containing a new handwritten message in Ben's familiar script. Each one was more cryptic, more unsettling than the last. The storm wasn't natural. There's something out here in the deep. I can't come back yet. It won't let me. With each new, perplexing message, my desperate determination grew exponentially. I meticulously bought detailed maps of ocean currents, spending hours studying them, trying to predict their unpredictable paths. I pored over historical weather patterns, seeking anomalies. I pestered the Coast Guard relentlessly, begging them to resume the search, to dedicate more resources, but without hard, irrefutable evidence, they stubbornly refused to commit to what they saw as a wild goose chase, a delusional obsession. So, with a heavy heart but an unwavering resolve, I took matters into my own hands. I drained my entire life savings, every last penny, to rent a sturdy fishing boat, stocked it meticulously with ample supplies, and set out to find Ben myself, a lone journey into the unknown. I spent weeks at sea, alone with my thoughts and the vast expanse of water, diligently following the shifting currents, searching remote, desolate islands and forgotten, uninhabited atolls, driven by an unshakable belief. And then, on a tiny, uncharted island, barely large enough to qualify as more than a shifting sandbar, I found something. Half buried in the wet sand was a piece of weathered wood with familiar, hand-painted lettering, Jenny M. The last part of the name had broken off, splintered, but I knew deep in my heart that it was from Ben's boat, the Sea Siren, Jenny May being his late wife. The boat was named after her originally. A surge of raw, electric excitement coursed through me, a jolt of adrenaline. This was proof, irrefutable proof that I wasn't crazy, that my intuition was right, that Ben might still be out there somewhere, alive. I immediately radioed the Coast Guard, my voice shaking with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration as I reported my incredible find. But when they finally arrived, hours later, the tide had come in, a cruel twist of fate, washing away my precious evidence. The piece of wood was gone, vanished back into the relentless sea. The Coast Guard officers were sympathetic, their faces filled with pity, but ultimately firm. Without concrete, undeniable proof, they simply couldn't justify a full-scale search, couldn't commit precious resources to a single, isolated incident. I returned home, utterly dejected, defeated, but not entirely disheartened. I knew what I'd seen. I knew Ben was out there somewhere, trying desperately to tell me something, to warn me. The messages in the bottles, those cryptic missives from the deep, became my sole obsession. I pored over them ceaselessly, day and night, looking for any patterns, any hidden meanings, any subtle clues that might finally give me a tangible hint to Ben's exact whereabouts, to his mysterious predicament. And then, precisely 1 year to the day after Ben's inexplicable disappearance, I received one final, heavier bottle. The message inside was longer than the others, handwritten on a larger piece of paper, the handwriting shaky, almost illegible in places, but undeniably, unequivocally Ben's. "Mike, old friend." It read, the words a bittersweet echo of his voice. "I'm so sorry for all the worry I've caused you, for the pain. The truth is, I can't come back. What I've seen out here, what I've learned, the world isn't ready for it. Not yet. Maybe someday I'll be able to explain everything, to tell you the full, incredible story. Until then, know that I'm okay. I'm where I need to be, doing what I'm meant to do. Take care of yourself, Mike. And always remember, the sea holds more secrets than we can ever imagine." I've read that final message 1,000 times, each word etched into my memory, tirelessly trying to comprehend what Ben truly meant. What did he see out there, in the vast, unexplored depths? What could possibly be so incredible, so utterly unbelievable, so terrifyingly profound that he wouldn't come back to the world he knew? The official investigation into Ben's disappearance has long since been closed, sealed away in dusty files. To the rest of the world, he's just another tragedy, another life tragically claimed by the indifferent sea, a statistic. But I know better. Sometimes on quiet, moonlit nights, I sit alone on the deserted beach and stare out at the vast, dark ocean, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I see a faint light out there on the distant horizon, moving in a way no ordinary boat ever would, an impossible dance. In those fleeting moments, a small smile touches my lips, and I quietly raise an imaginary toast to my old friend, Captain Ben. Ben's out there somewhere, of that I am absolutely certain. He's found something, discovered some incredible, world-altering secret of the deep that we mere landlubbers couldn't even begin to comprehend, something that has fundamentally changed him. And while a part of me, a deeply human part, still desperately hopes that someday he'll miraculously return and share that wondrous secret, another part, a more serene acceptance, is content knowing that he's where he truly wants to be, where he's meant to be, unraveling the profound mysteries of the sea, sailing into the unknown. As for me, I'll keep watching the waves, endlessly waiting for the next bottle, for the next message, for the next hint of his extraordinary journey. Because out there, somewhere between the known and the unknown, between the tangible and the ethereal, my friend sails on, a modern-day Flying Dutchman, a silent guardian of secrets we can only begin to imagine, only dream of. And who knows? Maybe someday when the world is finally ready, when humanity is prepared to embrace the unbelievable, Ben will come sailing back into harbor, his sea siren cutting through the waves, with a tale, a story, that will change everything we think we know about the vast, mysterious, and infinitely deep oceans that cover our world. Until then, I'll be here, keeping my solitary watch, ready to welcome my friend home, whenever he decides it's time to return from the deep. The piercing scream ripped through the quiet, ordinary suburban afternoon, shattering the peace like a hammer through brittle glass. It was Lily's voice, I was absolutely sure of it, that distinct, high-pitched shriek of pure terror. But by the time I frantically ran outside, bursting through the back door, she was gone, utterly vanished from our own familiar backyard, swallowed by the mundane. Nothing was left behind but an overturned lawn chair, its plastic legs pointing skyward, and a half-empty glass of lemonade, still sweating condensation, a chilling testament to her recent presence. I'm Emma, Lily's older sister, and I was the very last person to see her before she inexplicably disappeared. It was a languid, lazy Saturday in July, the kind of day where the oppressive heat shimmered visibly off the baking pavement, distorting the air, and time itself seemed to stretch endlessly like warm, gooey taffy, slowing to a crawl. Lily had been lounging contentedly in the backyard, soaking up the relentless sun, her voice drifting in through the open window, complaining playfully about being utterly bored, a familiar lament. I was inside, hunched over my desk, diligently working on a tedious summer school project, only half listening to her incessant chatter, her cheerful monologue about nothing in particular. "Emma, did you see that car?" Lily's voice had suddenly drifted in, tinged with a new, curious edge, a hint of something unusual. "It's been parked across the street for like an hour now. It's just sitting there." I remember sighing audibly, a sound of mild annoyance, not even bothering to lift my gaze from my dense textbook, my focus stubbornly on my studies. "It's probably just someone visiting the Johnsons," I'd said dismissively, brushing off her observation. "Stop being so nosy, Lily. If only. If only I had paid closer attention. If only I had bothered to look out that window, to cast even a fleeting glance. Maybe then, just maybe, I would have seen something, noticed something, some small crucial detail that could have prevented the terrifying, life-altering event that happened next." It couldn't have been more than 15 agonizing minutes later when I heard the scream. It wasn't a playful shout or a startled cry. It was a pure, guttural shriek of absolute terror. I bolted upright from my chair, my heart immediately pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Lily," I called out, my voice laced with immediate alarm, already moving, driven by pure instinct, towards the back door, a sudden sense of dread washing over me. But there was no answer. Just an eerie, suffocating silence that seemed to press in from all sides, heavy and ominous, amplifying my fear. The backyard was utterly empty when I burst out the door, my eyes scanning frantically. Lily's favorite magazine lay open on the sun-baked grass, its glossy pages fluttering gently in the faint breeze, a testament to her recent, carefree presence. Her phone was still resting casually on the arm of the lawn chair, its screen illuminated, displaying a half-written text message, a mundane detail that now seemed chilling. But Lily herself was nowhere to be seen, no trace of her anywhere. I called her name again, my voice now growing more frantic, more desperate with each unanswered shout, the panic rising in my throat. I searched every single corner of our yard, meticulously combing every flower bed, every bush. I peered over the fences, frantically looking into the neighbors' properties, my eyes darting, searching. I even ran to check the front yard and the street, a desperate, irrational hope still clinging to me. Nothing. It was as if Lily had simply, inexplicably, evaporated into the warm summer air, vanishing without a trace, a ghost in the daylight. The next few hours were a disorienting, nightmarish blur of piercing police sirens, urgent, repetitive questions, and a spiraling, all-consuming panic. Our parents, their faces ashen, drained of color, rushed home from work, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. The police, efficient and grim-faced, meticulously combed the entire neighborhood, interviewing every single person on our quiet street, asking the same questions over and over. That's when we first learned about the car Lily had mentioned, a dark, nondescript sedan that no one recognized, which had apparently sped away from our street moments before I'd heard the scream, vanishing into the distance. As night finally fell, casting long, unsettling shadows, and there was still no sign of Lily, no trace of her whereabouts, the horrifying reality of the situation began to slowly, painfully sink in. This wasn't some silly prank, some elaborate misunderstanding, or a childish runaway attempt. My little sister was truly, terrifyingly missing, taken from our own safe backyard in broad daylight, a violation of everything we held sacred. The days that followed were a nightmarish whirlwind of relentless police investigations. Aggressive news reporters camped out persistently on our front lawn, their cameras flashing, and a growing, suffocating sense of utter helplessness, a paralysis of grief. Lily's smiling face was plastered across every local news channel, her bright, innocent smile beaming out from countless missing person posters that seemed to multiply overnight, affixed to every lamppost, every tree, every store window. I couldn't sleep, haunted by her absence. I couldn't eat food tasteless in my mouth. Every single time I closed my eyes, I vividly saw Lily's terrified face, heard her desperate scream echoing relentlessly in my mind, an endless loop of horror. The guilt, a crushing, suffocating weight, was overwhelming. If only I'd looked out that window when she mentioned that car. If only I'd paid attention. If I'd been out there with her instead of stuck inside with my stupid, meaningless summer school project, maybe she would still be here. A week after Lily mysteriously disappeared, I was rummaging desperately through her room, searching frantically for any tiny clue we might have inadvertently missed, any overlooked detail that could unlock the mystery, when I noticed something profoundly odd. Her mirror, the full-length one on her closet door, had a strange, almost invisible message scrawled across its dusty surface in Lily's distinctive, familiar handwriting. It was faint, barely discernible, as if she'd written it quickly with her finger in a thin layer of dust that had accumulated, but was unmistakably there. The message read, LHVWKRXVHRQSLQHVU Hi W. I stared at it, utterly baffled, my brow furrowed in confusion. It looked like absolute gibberish, a meaningless jumble of letters, but something about it, some tiny flicker of intuition, nagged persistently at me, a familiar itch in my memory. Lily and I used to play constantly with secret codes and elaborate ciphers when we were younger, a shared game of intrigue. Could this, I wondered desperately, be something similar? Driven by an overpowering mix of desperate hope and mounting frustration, I spent the next few agonizing hours trying every single code and cipher I could possibly think of, every permutation, every substitution. Finally, exhausted, my head aching, and on the verge of giving up, I miraculously cracked it. It was a simple Caesar cipher, a substitution code where each letter is shifted a fixed number of places down the alphabet. In this case, each letter was shifted exactly 3 places. The decoded message, chillingly clear, read, "Last house on Pine Street." My heart raced, pounding a frantic drumbeat in my chest. Pine Street was just a few short blocks away from our house, a quiet residential road. Had Lily, in those terrifying moments, somehow managed to leave this message as a desperate clue, a trail for me to follow? But when? And why hadn't anyone, not even me, noticed it before? I immediately ran to tell our parents and the police, my voice breathless with urgency and excitement. They were understandably skeptical at first. After all, They'd already meticulously searched every single house in the neighborhood, leaving no stone unturned. But I was fiercely insistent, my conviction unwavering, my arguments passionate and desperate, and finally, after much pleading, they reluctantly agreed to check it out. The last house on Pine Street was an old, dilapidated place, clearly run down and neglected, that had been empty for years, its windows like vacant eyes. As we approached the decaying structure, a strange, undeniable sense of anticipation began to build within me, a premonition. Something about this felt right, felt profoundly important, felt like the answer. The police entered first, their hands resting instinctively on their weapons, their faces grim. I held my breath, straining my ears, trying desperately to hear any sound from inside, any sign of Lily. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity, an agonizing stretch of time. And then suddenly a triumphant shout erupted from deep within the house. We got something. What they found sent profound chills, cold tendrils of dread, straight down my spine. In a dusty room on the second floor, the walls were literally covered with photographs. Photos of Lily, of our house, of her at school, of her walking our dog, of her laughing with friends. Whoever had taken her had been watching her, meticulously stalking her, for weeks, perhaps even months, every single aspect of her life recorded. But Lily wasn't there. Instead, they found yet another coded message, this time scratched roughly into the grimy wooden floorboards, almost invisible in the dim light, RPRI Dockery. My hands shook violently as I quickly, desperately decoded it, my mind racing through the familiar cipher. The message, clear and horrifying, revealed the next clue. Next move, abandoned factory. The abandoned factory on the very edge of town had been a notorious source of local ghost stories and reckless dares for years, a dark, imposing landmark. As we raced there, police lights flashing maniacally, sirens blaring a mournful wail through the quiet streets, I couldn't help but wonder, a terrifying thought gnawing at me. Was this all some sick, twisted game? Were we being led on a wild goose chase, a cruel deception, while Lily was suffering, terrified, somewhere else entirely? The factory itself was a huge, sprawling, decaying complex, a labyrinth of shadowy corners, rusting machinery, and crumbling concrete. As the police officers fanned out, spreading into the vast, oppressive darkness to search, I found myself inexplicably drawn to a particular, nondescript building, guided by some primal instinct I couldn't begin to explain, a gut feeling. And there, in a small, dusty office at the very back of the building, amidst the industrial decay, we found her. Lily was huddled tightly in a corner, dirty, disheveled, and utterly terrified, but miraculously, incredibly alive. The relief that flooded through me was so intense, so overwhelming. It was almost physically painful, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. As the paramedics swiftly checked her over, their movements calm and efficient, and the police meticulously secured the scene, Lily clung to me, sobbing uncontrollably, her small body trembling against mine. Through her tears, her voice hoarse and raw from screaming, she managed to explain what had happened. A man, a stranger, had suddenly grabbed her from the backyard, throwing her into the dark sedan she'd noticed. But she'd managed, with incredible presence of mind and courage, to quickly scrawl the coded message onto her mirror before he violently took her away. She had then overheard him talking, just fleeting fragments of conversation, about moving her to the abandoned factory, a chilling, overheard plan. And so, when he had briefly, carelessly left her alone in the deserted house on Pine Street, she had, with a desperate surge of strength, left the second coded message, a final lifeline. "I knew you'd figure it out, Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible, still trembling. "I knew you'd find me." The man who took Lily was caught almost immediately, trying desperately to flee the factory through a broken fence. It turned out he was a recently released convict, a dangerous individual with a disturbing history of abductions, a predator. The dark sedan Lily had noticed was indeed his, stolen from a used car lot 2 states over, a vehicle of terror. In the weeks that followed, as Lily slowly, bravely began the long, arduous process of recovery, both physical and emotional, and our family painstakingly tried to heal from the profound trauma, from the gaping wound left by her abduction, I found myself constantly haunted by thoughts of what might have been, of the terrifying alternative. How close had we truly come to losing Lily forever? What if I hadn't remembered our old childhood coding games, those silly pastimes? What if I hadn't noticed that faint, almost invisible message on her mirror. But mostly, an overwhelming sense of profound gratitude washed over me, grateful that Lily had possessed the incredible presence of mind, the raw courage, to leave those crucial clues, grateful that she'd never, ever given up hope that we would find her, that we would bring her home. Our quiet suburban life has changed forever, irrevocably altered by that terrifying day. We're more cautious now, more vigilant, more acutely aware of the insidious dangers that can lurk even in seemingly safe, familiar places. But we are also undeniably stronger, more resilient, and infinitely closer as a family, bound by shared trauma and unwavering love. And me? I've developed a profound newfound appreciation for the incredible power of paying attention, of truly noticing the small, seemingly insignificant details that others might easily miss, that often go unnoticed in the rush of daily life. Because sometimes, just sometimes, those tiny overlooked details can make all the difference in the world, the difference between tragedy and triumph, between agonizing loss and joyous reunion. Lily is back home now, safe and sound, sleeping peacefully in her own room, just down the hall from mine. But I still find myself instinctively checking on her in the night, my steps quiet, my heart filled with a protective love, reassuring myself that she's truly, physically there, breathing softly. And sometimes, when the house is still and quiet, and the lingering memories of those terrifying days threaten to overwhelm me, to pull me back into the abyss of fear, I remind myself of the most important lesson I learned from this entire harrowing ordeal. Never ever underestimate the powerful, unbreakable bond between siblings. Because sometimes, that bond, that invisible, unbreakable thread of connection, can be the very thing that leads you through the darkest, most terrifying of labyrinths, guiding you relentlessly back to the warm, comforting light of home.